Chapter 369. Impossible. Impossible. How is this possible? Kyoji would rather believe that he was dreaming than believe that Ryudo could answer all these complex questions. From a scholar's point of view, Ryudo's answers were logical and impeccable. Even if Kyoji answered it himself, he would have the same feeling. But the person who answered it was Ryudo. It was the leader of the Rulon group, the incompetent hoodlum leader, Ryudo Kiryu. It was like you took a banana and hung it on the roof to entice a monkey. You wanted to see the monkey jump up and down. In the end, the monkey turned his head and revealed a mocking expression. With a leap, he soared into the sky and plucked the banana on the spot. He even wanted to eat it all in front of you before throwing the banana skin at your face. In short, when Ryudo passed all of his father-in-law's tests in such a dignified manner, a thunderous applause came from the main hall. Beautiful. To have such talent at such a young age. No wonder he's the son-in-law of the Tsukiji family. Who was the one who said that the Dragon Fighter Lord was ignorant and incompetent? Wasn't it Kyoji? Ha ha ha. It means that guy also has times when he makes a mistake. Maybe he didn't make a mistake. Maybe he was jealous because his daughter was snatched away, which led him to spout nonsense. For a moment, the Tsukiji family's intellectuals in the main hall applauded in admiration. They laughed and talked about the enemies between Ryudo and Kyoji. It had to be said that after learning that his daughter was pregnant, Kyoji did complain a lot about Ryudo to his relatives after he was drunk. Among them was that the guy was incompetent and was almost illiterate, which left a deep impression on many people. After all, the Tsukiji family was a family with a strong academic atmosphere. How could they allow an illiterate person in the family? That would be too shameful. But in fact, after seeing Long Do with their own eyes and hearing his explanation, almost all of his relatives were in awe of his talent. Look, this is only a 17-year-old young man. To have such an exaggerated amount of knowledge at such a young age, and to be able to adapt to the situation and use it flexibly, this kid will definitely become someone great in the future. However, just as the group of relatives surrounded the father and son duo and warmly congratulated them, the initiator of this farce, Sakujiri Kyoji, gasped for breath while clutching his heart. Infuriating. 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 If it wasn't for the fact that Gongsi was still young and his heart wasn't damaged, he might have been angered to death on the spot. That kid must have cheated. He must have cheated in some way. Otherwise, even if you beat me to death, I won't believe he has real knowledge in this area. But how did Ryudo cheat? Gongsi couldn't figure it out. After all, those questions were prepared on the spur of the moment, and there was no draft in advance. Naturally, there was no risk of the questions being leaked. Then how did Long Do memorize all the answers to the questions in just a few minutes after receiving the test paper? No matter what, this was something that was impossible, right? Can't figure it out? That's right. Sensing the incredulous gaze of his second father-in-law, Long Do, who was surrounded by enthusiastic aunts and aunts asking him when he would have his second child, third child and fourth child, revealed a strange smile to Gongsi. Of course Ryudo cheated. If he didn't cheat, how could he answer those questions? Then how did Ryudo cheat? He cheated with his life. In fact, this was the 5th time he saw the test paper. When he saw the test paper for the first time in the dragon battle, he knew that he would definitely not be able to answer all the questions. Therefore, he immediately used the excuse of going to the bathroom to contact Sensible. He told Sensible to search the internet for the answers as soon as possible. Fortunately, all the questions Kyoji chose were questions that had already been answered by the academic community. As long as he looked carefully, he would be able to find a similar thesis. After finding a part of the answers, Ryudo used the excuse of going to the bathroom for a long time. Therefore, he decided to kill himself and reopen the door. He came to the Suki no Suki and asked Sensible to help him find the answers again. After repeating this several times, Dragon's Fight finally collected all the answers in the book. With his extraordinary memory and LV5 wisdom, he quickly memorized and mastered everything in the book. In an instant, he became an ultimate academic master. Just like that, Kyoji's scheme failed. In this situation where all his friends and family were present, He could only discuss the details of their children's marriage with Kazuma. This situation was quite humiliating for Kyoji. It was a day of humiliation. At this time, Ryudo, the initiator of Kyoji's humiliation, was led to the back of the house by his mother-in-law, Junchin, to the door of Yunyan's room. Okay. After bringing Ryudo here, Junchin smiled and said, "The tedious traditions are almost done. Next, I'll give you two some private time together." Since Ryudo decided to propose not long ago, Yunyan hadn't seen him for many days. The two missed each other. As a woman, Junchin naturally understood her daughter's thoughts. Therefore, she picked up the key card and opened the door. She quietly let Ryudo in. Speaking of Yunyan's room, Ryudo was very familiar with it. Back then, when he first came here, the things that happened were unforgettable. As for Long-do, it was also the first time he knew that senior sister Yunyan actually knew how to play. Cough cough. Just thinking about that scene was unbearable. So after opening the door, he slipped in stealthily and went in as quietly as possible. Because it was daytime, the lights in the room weren't turned on. However, the curtains were drawn tightly, causing the light in the room to be dim. Ryudo's shifty eyes slowly scanned the dark room. Then, he saw many things that weren't placed here before. The large white oak table was scattered with all kinds of baby clothes of various sizes. These small clothes seemed to have been properly ironed with an iron. The clothes were embroidered and pasted with all kinds of patterns. They looked very beautiful. The originally ordinary windows had been replaced with large pieces of colored glass, and the walls were also redecorated with pink wallpaper. It looked colorful and rather cute. A large crib was next to Yunyan's bed. If Ryudo wasn't mistaken, there seemed to be an automatic rocking music and an electric drive system under the crib. It was like a small car. No way, right? It's only been 2 months. You've prepared everything so quickly? When he saw the exaggerated furnishings and objects in Yunyan's room, Ryudo really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, since Yunyan was confirmed to be pregnant, the Tsuchikami family had been very nervous about her. That feeling was really like being afraid of falling when walking, being afraid of being pressed when sleeping, and even not letting Yunyan take a bath by herself. They had to arrange for several maids to serve her. Yunyan felt like she had become a useless person. She also complained, "It's only been 2 months, and they don't let me do this and that. If it's 5 or 6 months, won't I be unable to walk?" However, no matter how much Yunyan complained, the family's supervision of her didn't stop. In fact, it was getting more and more intense. But even so, Ryudo didn't expect that the family would prepare a full set of childcare products when the child was only 2 months old. Wasn't this a bit too exaggerated? Perhaps it wasn't exaggerated because just beside the desk near the windowsill in the room, Ryudo saw an even more exaggerated scene. Hee, la la la. In the dim room, a somewhat strange song reached Ryudo's ears. The woman sitting at the desk holding something and humming was wearing a loose milky white dress. Her fluffy brown hair fell on her shoulders, and her eyes were slightly narrowed. Her expression seemed to be very focused. Even if someone sneaked into the room, she didn't have the slightest reaction. Instead, her attention was focused on the baby in her arms. Ryudo walked over and saw that Yunyan was holding and playing with a fake baby. In front of her were a series of childcare books, such as 10 Comfortable Ways to Hold a Baby and Introduction to Motherhood. 3 songs to put a baby to sleep. Logically speaking, Yunyan was at least 7 or 8 months away from giving birth. She didn't have the right to say that her parents were too nervous when she started reading such books so early. She didn't seem to be any better. Good heavens! So she was learning how to take care of a child. Seeing Yunyan's serious and focused look, Ryudo felt a little funny at first. Then, he was attracted by the strong maternal aura emitted from her body. So beautiful, although Yunyan was also very beautiful normally, and her temperament was even on the level of an angel. After being pregnant and having a slight bump on her stomach, she seemed to be even more beautiful, especially when he saw her holding the fake baby for practice and singing softly, swaying the swaddling clothes left and right in her arms. Ryudo couldn't help but slowly walk over from behind and reach out to hug Yunyan's shoulder. Yunyan Exine. Yeah. Before Ryudo could finish the sentence, Yunyan. Thank you for your hard work. Yunyan, who was indulging in the joy of coaxing the baby, suddenly screamed. Then, she threw the swaddling clothes in her hands at Ryudo's face. In that instant, Yunyan's strong maternal instinct disappeared. After all, a mother who used a child to smash her father's head was more or less a little violent. Chapter 370. What? It turns out to be Ryudo. I'm very sorry. When Yunyan finally came to her senses and realized that she had hit the child's father with her child, she hurriedly apologized and reached out to rub Longdo's forehead. Ryudo held her soft palm and smiled. What's wrong? Have you been practicing how to take care of the child at home recently? Isn't this a little too early? It's not early. Recently, my stomach seems to have bulged a little, and I always feel that he is moving around in my stomach. At this time, Yunyan reached out and touched her belly that was still flat. In fact, there was no bulge at all, and said in a gentle tone. Of course, the belly of a 2-month pregnant woman generally didn't change much, and the thing in the belly wouldn't move around. It was all just Yunyan's psychological effect. But Ryudo naturally wouldn't say such boring words. Instead, he hugged Yunyan in his arms, and also reached out to touch the belly that was pregnant with his first child. And Yunyan also leaned her head on her lover's shoulder, enjoying the peace of the two of them at this moment. In a dim room with various childcare products, the two men and women who were about to get married snuggled together, and the air was full of romance. However, because Yunyan was now in a pregnant state, the intimacy between the two was only superficial. They separated after a little tenderness, so as not to affect the baby. By the way, my dad is outside discussing the details of the marriage with your parents. Do you have any suggestions in this regard? Watching Yunyan put the fake baby used for practice back into the stroller, Ryudo sat on her bed and asked with a smile. Generally speaking, marriage was a matter of two people, but it was not entirely a matter of two people. It was a matter of two families. Especially for Ryudo, it was even more complicated. He was going to marry 3 women at the same time, which involved a strong combination of 4 families. Therefore, there were many things that could be argued about the venue and the form of the wedding. It was simply endless. Hearing this, Yunyan nodded and said, We have more foreign relatives in our family, and the education we received is more Western. My parents mentioned before that if possible, it is more appropriate to hold a Western-style wedding. A Western-style wedding was not unreasonable. Speaking of which, although there were many types of weddings, Western-style weddings were still the most accepted type. Almost every place could accept it. Of course, although Yunyan said so, colored glaze and dunias were not necessarily so. Ryudo had to ask them one by one and discuss it with them one by one to confirm it. Therefore, the matters in the Tsukini Koden were almost solved. Next, he had to go to the Saito and Kansai Yuan. Before leaving, Longdo took out a special ring from his portable space and knelt down on one knee in front of senior sister Yunyan. He proposed to her one step later than Longdo did. Miss Yuejian Li Yunyan, although it's a bit late to say this, are you willing to marry me? This time, Ryudo took out a double-layer bead chain diamond ring inlaid with a 1-carat pink diamond. It was different from the engagement rings given to the 3 before. In the design of the engagement ring, the 3 used red, blue, and yellow gems respectively, and of course, Eternity and Wallet Crematorium diamonds were used on the wedding ring. Speaking of which, it was strange. Although Longdo had given the 3 of them engagement rings before, he had never proposed to them. So this was the first time he solemnly gave a promise to his wife. As for why Yunyan was the first candidate to propose, it had something to do with the baby in her belly. The mother of the baby still had some privileges. After seeing the ring, Yunyan couldn't help but smile. Her clear eyes seemed to be smiling. We're already an old couple. Why do you still want to do this? However, she still held out her hand in a very ritualistic manner and nodded. I do. As the diamond ring was personally put on Yunyan's finger by Ryudo, the marriage proposal ceremony was completed. The next event was Ryudo taking his fiancée out to receive the celebration of his family and friends. After seeing the shiny diamond ring on Union's finger, many people gave the two their blessings. Even Kyoji, who was angry to the point of having a brain hemorrhage, could only sigh and admit the reality. After everyone had a lively dinner in the Tsukini Koden, Kazuma and Ryuto, the father and son, took the car home drunk. Those scientists, professors, and scholars were too good at drinking. On the way back, Ryuto couldn't help but think. After all, Ryuto's alcohol tolerance was really high. He was the one who usually accompanied Dunya to drink vodka. To be able to make such an old drunkard drunk, it was obvious how fierce those people were when it came to persuading people to drink. But no matter what, the Tsukini family's matter was settled. The marriage with Union had been finalized. They only needed to discuss some details. It was just that one family was finished, and there were still two more that hadn't started yet. This long road of marriage proposal was only 1/3 complete. So in the early morning of the second day, Ryuto, who was hungover, once again sat in Narukai's car with Kazuma and drove to the second family's residence, the Saitu Hall. On the way to the Saitu Hall, Kazuma reminded, "I once heard from Takeshi that if someone wants to marry his daughter, he has to prove that he is a real man, so they should have another test." The test of the Saitu Hall. As long as it's not about scientific research or academics, it's fine. Thinking of the exam paper that forced him to reopen 5 times yesterday, Ryuto still felt a little headache. After all, with so many academic papers, even if it was just memorizing and understanding them, it would take a lot of energy. But compared to the Tsukini family, the Saitu family should be better. After all, they were a group of martial artists. The test of martial artists. At most they would fight. With the current strength of Ryuto's fist and kick, he was almost invincible in the world. To put it bluntly, the entire Saitu Hall might not be able to defeat him, even if all the members came together. So for the so-called test of the Saitu family, Ryuto basically didn't care much, until the father and son came to the gate of the Saitu Hall, and saw a long line of people standing at the gate to welcome them. Saitu Hall was currently the largest martial arts organization in the country, and it was also the most famous martial arts club in the country. According to the statistics, the Saitu Guild Hall had more than 20,000 apprentices in the Tokyo region alone. Their sphere of influence was simply ridiculously large, and the number of elite soldiers under them was innumerable. However, even so, Ryuto didn't expect that when their exclusive car of the Rulon group drove to the street, both sides of the street were already filled with rows of strong men in training clothes. That's right, they were on both sides of the street. Thousands of Saitu Guild's apprentices lined up on both sides of the street, like a guard of honor welcoming guests. It made Ryudo and Kazuma's car feel like they were surrounded by people from all directions when they drove past. How should this situation be described? Are they crazy? Because Yima had already told Wu Hong's old friend that he was going to propose marriage in the morning, so this matter must be arranged by Wu Hong's president. But who would find thousands of apprentices to line up on both sides of the street, just to welcome their son-in-law to propose marriage? Isn't there something wrong with their brain, or they have nothing to do? Especially when they arrived at the entrance of the huge building of the Saitu Guild Hall. The scene that appeared made the father and son even more dumbfounded. As the largest dojo in Tokyo, the main building of the Saitu Guild Hall was naturally quite magnificent. It was a 9-story building with a wide area. Although the decoration was not luxurious, it was very rigid. There was even a tiger skin placed at the door, which looked very dignified. At this time, the current president Saitu Takahiro was standing in front of the tiger skin, standing on the stairs, looking down at Ryudo and Yima, who got out of the car. Around Saitu Takahiro, there were also members wearing Saitu Hall's training clothes. But these members were basically wearing a black belt, and it seemed that their status was much higher than the group of people outside. Seeing the stunned father and son finally came to the door, Takahiro laughed and said, "Ha ha ha ha. Tongxing Yima, Ryudo Kiryu, long time no see. No, I just looked for you to drink the night before yesterday. How is it long time no see?" Hearing this sentence, Yima couldn't help but rub the back of his head and ridicule. But Takahiro obviously didn't intend to answer him, and said, "However, if you want to be the son-in-law of my Saito family, it's not that simple. You have to accept a series of strict tests and prove that you are a real man." Whoa, whoa, whoa. A real man. A real man. A real man. Suddenly, the group of apprentices around Takahiro began to shout loudly. At first glance, the scene looked very imposing, but thinking about it carefully, it was very Chinibu. Longdo, on the other hand, had already expected this. He smiled and said, "Then what's the test like? Just say it, I don't care." Humph. After hearing Ryudo's tone, Takahiro coldly snorted and said, "Do you see this building? My daughter is waiting for you on the rooftop. So, as long as you can climb to the top of the building and see Dunya, you'll win. However, every floor of the building is filled with the strongest fighters of my Saito guild, and you'll have to defeat 9 of them." Originally, Takahiro wanted to say, "You have to defeat 9 opponents before you can go to the top of the building." But before he finished speaking, Ryudo's body directly jumped to the top of the doorpost on the first floor. "As long as I go to the top of the building, it's easy. Bye, I'll go first." Before the people downstairs could react, Longdo's figure madly rushed up the outside of the building under their stunned gazes. The scene looked like Spider-Man climbing the building. It was effortless. Chapter 371. What is this thing? Is he really a human? Looking at Ryudo's figure actually climbing and jumping from the outside of the vertical building, the group of Saito Guild Hall's warriors below were all stunned. Especially Saito Takahiro, who proposed this tower climbing challenge. His mouth was wide open like a fish out of water. It was quite a comical sight. No, I did ask you to climb the tower. But I didn't ask you to climb the tower like this." Originally, Saito Takahiro had expected the Ryujin duel to be like a challenge in a game, going up to the top floor of the Saito Guild Hall. Every floor they passed, they would encounter a powerful opponent. Although he might not be able to defeat the son-in-law of the Saito family after 9 matches, at least he would be able to create momentum, and the whole process would benefit the martial artists a lot. But who would have thought that Ryudo didn't want to fight with them at all? Instead, he chose to climb the tower. They asked him to climb up from the inside floor by floor, but he climbed up from the outside floor by floor. But it has to be said that Ryudo's climbing movements were really cool. His body was like a flexible flea flying on the outside of the stairs. From time to time, he would grab the windowsill to jump up, or he would step on the outside of the air conditioner to rush up more than 10 meters. He was actually climbing crazily on the outside of the completely vertical building. This scene really stunned everyone around, but they couldn't help but feel their scalps tingle from his nimble movements. No, if he goes up like this, won't it mean that our Saito Guild headquarters will lose a lot? Thinking of this, Takahiro took a deep breath and shouted to the surrounding students, "Go! This is Ryudo, Kuin's challenge to us, we can't fall behind. Hurry up and catch up with him." Hearing the president's words, a deputy director couldn't help but ask, Catch up with him? From here?" As he said, he pointed to the outside of the vertical Saito Guild headquarters building, as if wondering if the president was joking. "Just from here. This is a real man's challenge. I'll go first." Takahiro also nodded, then quickly turned his head and jumped up. He jumped to the beam next to the main entrance of the first floor, and began to climb up with difficulty. The dignified president of the Saito Guild Hall actually began to play unprotected barehanded climbing outside his own building. This scene seemed quite ridiculous. However, since President Saito had stepped forward, the other students naturally couldn't fall behind. "Charge! If you're a man, then follow me." Damn it! Wasn't it just climbing a wall? Isn't it just a 9-story building? What's so great about that? Is this what a real man is like? I want to stand at the top of the world. The next moment, the crowd began to rush toward the doorposts, windowsills, and beams outside the building. He imitated the male assessment conducted by his own president. Are you kidding me? Was there something wrong with their brains? Suddenly, Yima, who was standing at the back, couldn't help but be dumbstruck, as if he didn't know what to say for a moment. That day, The headquarters of the Saitu Guild Hall was very lively. Led by President Saitu Takahiro, a group of students climbed up the outside of the building barehanded. The outside of the building was densely packed with people, so it attracted a large number of people to watch from afar, and it also attracted the police and the fire department. After countless students climbed to the height of the second and third floor, they couldn't climb any higher, and they kept falling down on the cushions prepared in advance. This assessment that no one could pass finally came to an end under the mandatory prohibition of the police. Of course, although the students of the Saitu Guild Hall didn't become real men that day, this unique male assessment was passed down in the sect and became a tradition. From that day onwards, on this day every year, countless students from all over the country would flock to this place, attempting to climb the 9-story Saitu Guild Hall headquarters with their bare hands. They would be proud of the height they climbed. The first man who climbed to the top barehanded, Ryuto Kiryu, had already become a legendary figure in the Saitu Guild Hall, and he was called the god of barehanded climbing. Although Ryuto didn't want this title at all. However, the popularity of this male assessment was a matter of the future. At this time, Ryuto was quickly jumping on the roof, climbing to the top of the building in the shortest time. Going up to the top of the 9-story building, the first thing that caught Ryuto's eyes was a huge open-air square, and in the center of the square was a huge ring. Yes, the ring was made of simple stone bricks, about 1 meter high, about 200 meters in length and width, and there were flags that symbolized the Saitu clan around the ring. There was no doubt that the meaning of the ring was for people to fight. However, the person sitting in the center of the ring wasn't the group of burly men in training clothes from the 9 floors below, but a petite young girl. This young girl had silver hair that was as pure and kind as the Milky Way. Her fair and translucent skin, coupled with her slightly tender appearance and delicate hands and feet, made her look like a large doll that made people want to love her tenderly. However, just when Ryuto stepped over there, the doll-like girl, Saitu Dunya, slowly opened her eyes. "You came? I have been waiting for you for a long time." She slowly opened her mouth, but her tone was full of fighting spirit that Ryuto didn't expect. Fighting spirit? Why does Dunya have such an aura? Logically speaking, Ryuto came here today to propose marriage, and Dunya of course knew about it. So why did she have such an attitude? But now Ryuto wasn't stupid, especially when he knew Dunya very well. He understood her meaning. So that's how it is. Is this the final test for me to propose this marriage? It's not the Saitu clan's test, but your test, Ryuto said as he walked toward the large ring on the top of the 9-floor building, and he casually took off the tie around his neck to prevent it from being a hindrance during the fight. This was a test, or rather a challenge. This was Dunya's test for her future husband, and also a challenge for her future husband. Whoosh! Boom! The moment Ryuto walked onto the ring, Dunya's petite body suddenly floated into the air, and a pair of slender legs landed on the ring, and actually cracked the thick stone floor of the ring. Yes, this is my test and also my challenge. I really want to know if the gap in our strength is as big as I imagined. So, please allow me to be willful one last time. Dunya moved her front legs forward, squatted slightly, and raised her arms, and assumed a common fighting posture of the Saitu school of Paleo martial arts. For Dunya, as a martial artist, there were not many opponents in this world that she could find, and Ryuto was the target that she had been chasing ever since she started practicing martial arts. From the Emperor Hotel kidnapping case, to the 12 hours late-night pursuit, to the Tianmu Manor chaotic battle not long ago, Dunya had always been looking at Ryuto's back. Speaking of which, Dunya's martial arts were basically taught by Saitu Takahiro and Furamaki Sotaro. Ryuto did not teach her much, but Dunya had always treated him as her life mentor. After this short period of time, Dunya's strength could be said to have taken a qualitative leap, and had reached the true inhuman level. But every time she saw Ryuto, she would think, if she and Ryuto were to go all out, who would win in the end? Therefore, taking advantage of the time when the other party came to propose marriage, before the two of them became husband and wife, Dunya decisively challenged her future husband. She wanted to be sure that her future husband's strength was above hers. Only by fulfilling this wish, Dunya could completely accept her new identity as Ryudo's wife. These things, Dunya did not need to explain. When Ryudo saw her eyes, he already had a rough idea, so his response was very straightforward. Come, let's fight to our heart's content. At this time, Ryudo also got into a serious stance and adjusted his emotions to the peak of the battle. For a moment on the stage, the two of them just stood there without moving, their eyes fixed on each other. But the surrounding atmosphere had a qualitative change in an instant. Do-chi. The aura of the two of them seemed to have turned into an invisible do-chi, and the first wave of fierce confrontation in the air had already begun. The battle of aura was a very important part of the battle between experts. Whoever's aura was at a disadvantage, then the next move would be firmly suppressed by the other, and fall into an initial disadvantage. At this time, Ryudo and Dunya, who were fighting, both of them were at the top of the world's martial artists, the peak of human physical fitness. This was a battle between two LV5 physique, extreme superhuman. A battle between the peak of human beings. Moreover, the two of them were proficient in different schools. If they really fought, there would be a lot of variables. Ryudo was best at Ancient 8 Extreme Fist and Bone-Twisting Dragon Hand. Dunya was best at Saito-style Palea martial arts and Furamaki-style martial arts. But because Ryudo was also proficient in Furamaki-style martial arts, if they really fought, he would definitely have the absolute advantage. She had to disrupt his rhythm, or she would lose without a doubt. In the next moment, when the two of them were evenly matched, Dunya's figure finally moved first. The girl's upper body did not move, but with an extremely gentle and graceful movement, she quickly slid forward on the ground. Her posture was like a swan playing in water, so light that it made people think that she was a fairy from the lake. Chapter 372. This kind of movement ballet? Although Dunya's movement speed did not seem that fast, she appeared in front of Ryudo in an instant, and then instantly pierced through at a 90-degree angle to the left. Then from a strange angle, she lightly struck out with her palm. This palm seemed light, but the huge force that erupted from the palm was enough to shatter gold and iron. Moreover, the position she struck was Ryudo's temple. The reason why she attacked the vital part was not because Dunya wanted to kill Ryudo, but because she believed that this level of move could not kill him, so she could fight without worry. You really think highly of me. In a flash, Ryudo raised his elbow to block, directly blocking the palm that was aimed at his head. But before he could counterattack, Dunya's body had already slipped to the other side as light as a feather. This kind of movement should be a combination of the foot movement of ballet and the cat's foot movement of Saito-ryu Palea martial arts, combined with Dunya's super balance. What a powerful movement! At this moment, in Ryudo's eyes, Dunya was like a ghost, circling around him, dazzling him. Her body was clearly moving at high speed, but the upper half of her body did not seem to have any changes, maintaining a state of almost horizontal movement. Generally speaking, when anyone moved in any direction, their body would naturally lean forward in that direction, and at the same time, the movement of the feet would be accompanied by the movement of the waist, shoulders, and other body parts. After all, a person was a whole body, and there was no such thing as moving with the feet and not moving with the other body parts. But Dunya's current movement method completely broke this understanding. She was like a ghost, constantly moving horizontally, and constantly launching sneak attacks at Ryudo from various blind spots. The amazing thing about this kind of movement method was that it was ridiculously hidden, making it impossible to predict where she would go next. Coupled with her petite body, if one was not careful, it was possible to lose sight of her in a one-on-one situation. Even for Ryudo, who had experienced hundreds of battles, this was the first time in his life that he had encountered such a strange movement technique. Unknowingly, his back, shoulders, abdomen, and other parts of his body had already been hit many times. Although Dunya's every attack was light, as if there was no strength behind it. But in reality, if she hit a body of flesh and blood, even a bull's skin and flesh would be split open, and its bones would be shattered. That was the power of her attacks. On the other hand, although Long Do had 100% chi opening rate, bronze skin supreme, and iron bone ultimate to protect himself, he was still suffering a dull pain where he was hit, and the pain lingered. Good fellow. Soft body, hard fist. Combining both hard and soft. You've really figured out the path of the martial way. For the first time, Ryudo felt a real threat, and also felt Dunya's strength for the first time. Just as Ryudo knew, Dunya was a natural-born martial artist, and also a natural-born dancer. She inherited the strength of a martial artist from her father and mother respectively, and the flexibility of a ballet dancer. Now that she had combined both strength and flexibility into one, she had completely opened up a new kind of martial arts path. Her extremely nimble body movements coupled with her strength that could destroy gold and stones made people feel as if a ghost was holding a chainsaw in her hand, or a polar bear with wings on its back. He couldn't hit her, but he couldn't stand being hit. It was quite uncomfortable, but fortunately, Ryudo's eyes and consciousness had more or less adapted to it. This kind of mysterious martial arts system could destroy most opponents in a short time, but it could not destroy Ryudo, who had a body of copper skin and iron bones. At this time, Dunya, who had been attacking, also felt that her momentum was gradually declining. Although Ryudo had been taking a lot of hits since the beginning of the battle, from Dunya's point of view, it was as if she was hitting a small mountain of reinforced concrete compressed to the limit, and the outside of the small mountain was covered with thick iron sheets. It was useless. Unless she hit a vital point, or before the opponent could react, she would not be able to defeat Ryudo in this way for the rest of her life. There was no other way. She had to change her attack pattern. Seeing that Ryudo was gradually starting to react to her ghostly movement technique, Dunya did not hesitate. She directly moved forward and used her signature move, Saito Ryu Palea martial art, lightning bear in hand. The next moment, the slender palm accumulated strength and suddenly grabbed Ryudo's chin from below. The human body's chin was a super vital point. Once it was hit, the force would be transmitted through the jaw to the brain, causing an extremely serious concussion. Dunya's attack was strong and overbearing, and its speed was also extremely fast. However, Ryudo was not unable to react in time. Ancient Bajiquan, Overlord's reigns. In an instant, Ryudo did not dodge, but instead, he straightened his elbow. An elbow strike that was enough to split a mountain and shatter a metal came down from above towards Dunya's palm. One came from below, the other came from above. The momentum of both sides was different, and Ryudo was using his elbow. His elbow was used for short distance, and its power was naturally stronger than a fist. The result of this collision was self-evident. Under normal circumstances, the result of this head-on collision would most likely be Dunya's palm being directly shattered. Although Ryudo had held back a certain amount of strength, he did not go all out. Boom! When both sides' elbows collided, the air at the collision point was like a balloon filled with air bursting. The surging airflow was squeezed and made an explosive sound. The scene was very terrifying. But what made Ryudo very surprised was that Dunya's palm was not shattered by his elbow. On the contrary, his elbow was actually bounced back by this palm? What? This is? At the moment when both sides collided, Ryudo only felt that Dunya's palm was like a spring full of inner strength. The slender palm was like a twisted rope that was released all of a sudden. The strong spring force suddenly blasted Ryudo's elbow away. This feeling was like taking the initiative to attack a spring that was ready to be released, and the feeling of being bounced back suddenly. Ryudo had let many people experience it before, because this extremely hardcore move was something that Ryudo had already mastered. Furamaki-style martial arts, profound meaning of the body, hard shock. Among the three great profoundness of Furamaki, hard shock was a special technique that allowed one to contract a part of the muscles at the moment of the enemy's attack, turning the point of impact into a shield to destroy the opponent's fist. So that's how it is. Is that how it is? Just when his elbow was bounced back, a trace of craftiness flashed across Dunya's eyes. Only then did Ryudo understand what this little girl was planning. From the beginning, the Saito-style paleo martial arts, wild lightning hand, that Dunya used was a feint. She had already predicted that Ryudo would counterattack, so she used profound meaning of the body, hard shock, on her palm as a follow-up move. As a counterattack move, profound meaning of the body, hard shock, did not have any lethality when initiating an attack. It could only display its unique effect when taking a hit. In other words, even if the palm hit Ryudo's chin, the result would be like scratching an itch. After all, it was not a move that initiates an attack. However, Dunya had never thought of hitting Ryudo's chin. She was aiming to use hard shock to force Ryudo's elbow or palm away. And after she successfully achieved her goal, the next attack was the real killing move. Sorry, don't get killed by me. I don't want to be a widow at such a young age. Seeing Ryudo's elbow being knocked back, and his whole body temporarily losing balance, Dunya finally used her lifetime's worth of power on his body. She took a step forward. The ground that was stepped on by her small foot was like tofu, leaving a clear footprint on it. At this moment, Dunya's 5 fingers were clenched together, and her palms were slightly upturned. Her slender fingers and palms emitted the sound of blood and chi boiling. Even her snow-white skin had a hint of golden scarlet. Blood. Extremely powerful blood and chi power gathered on her palm, making it as hard as iron. It looked like the palm of a Buddha, full of majesty and weight. In the next second, the girl's palm carried the force of wind and thunder as it struck Ryudo's chest. Because the attack was too fast, the force was too heavy, and it was condensed with the power of blood and chi. Shockwaves suddenly surged out from both sides of her seemingly skinny arms. Behind her, a figure that Ryudo once fought against appeared faintly. This is... Before Dunya's palm landed on his chest, Ryudo's mind suddenly recalled a battle in the past. It was a battle to the death between him and the scum of the Saito family, the devil child Saito. And now, Dunya was actually using the ancient-style Qigong, Vajra palm of the Vajra sect. In fact, after Sata's death, Wu Hong's people searched his residence and secret base, and found a series of secret martial arts manuals that included the Vajra finger of the Vajra sect and Vajra palm of the Vajra sect. Although Dunya was not interested in the Vajra finger of the Vajra sect, which leaned towards the grappling system, the Vajra palm of the Vajra sect was very much to her taste. Therefore, she had been secretly practicing this move, hoping to give Ryudo a surprise. And now, it seemed like it was indeed a big surprise. Unfortunately, someone was not lucky enough to enjoy it. Boom! When this earth-shattering palm landed on Longdo's chest, the air was hit with a wave of sharp explosion. It could be seen how exaggerated the power of this attack was. But why was there an explosion in the air? Because when her palm landed, Ryudo's body slid down like a loach. He quickly twisted his body to the side, and avoided the Vajra palm of the Vajra sect, and appeared behind Dunya. Bone dislocation entangling dragon hands. Rising dragon bind. Before Dunya could react, 2 hands reached out from behind her, and bound her arms tightly in a strange position. Her legs were also tightly locked by the person behind her. In the blink of an eye, Dunya went from being the one who attacked to being completely bound by a grappling technique. She could not move at all, and could only be a fish on the chopping board. Chapter 373. At this moment, the two's bodies were stuck together with one in front and one behind. Ryudo was like a scoundrel who was about to commit violence. He single-handedly locked both of Dunya's arms behind her back. His right leg was like a python coiling around her straight and delicate legs. Then he pressed his chin against the girl's neck, directly locking down every part of her body. Such an exquisite grappling and locking technique was simply far beyond Dunya's expectations. For a moment, she felt like she was tightly coiled by a python. Her entire body could not move at all. What is going on? In an instant, the offense and defense were reversed. Dunya suddenly became the one who was on the receiving end. Her petite body was already at a disadvantage in close combat. That was why Dunya deliberately did not practice any grappling techniques. After all, she knew that even if she practiced it, it would be useless. With her short arms and legs, it would be very difficult for her to grasp other people's joints. Of course, when normal people fought with Dunya, they simply did not have the qualifications to use grappling techniques on her. They would probably be directly sent flying with a punch. But who would have thought that Ryudo's grappling techniques could be said to be the world's #1 expert? Moreover, his body was even stronger than Dunya's. This wave was called Heaven's Bane. With 100% proficiency in Dragon Bone Dislocation Hand, Dunya, who was not good at close-range combat in the first place, was immediately subdued. The battle was over in the blink of an eye. Seeing that Dunya was still trying to struggle in his embrace, Ryudo giggled and kissed her milky white little face. He laughed beside her ear and said, "Don't struggle. We're all martial artists. Don't be shy." As Ryudo said this, he was still blowing warm air beside Dunya's ear. Dunya's body trembled slightly as waves of heat rushed into her small and cute ears. Her originally serious face was suddenly covered with a layer of red, and the murderous air around her instantly disappeared. Don't mess around. Damn it. Was that the profound meaning of the heart acceptance just now? I still can't outsmart you, you sly fox. Humph. Although Dunya's face was slightly red from the breath beside her ear, she thought for a moment and understood why she was so unlucky just now. In fact, before Dunya launched her Vajra palm, Ryudo had already planned to use Receive Flow to dodge to the extreme. Also, the impact of hard hit shouldn't have been as big as it looked. Dunya schemed against Ryudo. She tried to shake off his arm and hit hard shock so that her big move could land on him. Ryudo also schemed against Dunya. He purposely exaggerated the impact of the hard shock to dodge the big move and circled behind her. Schemed against and got schemed against. It could only be said that although Dunya's ability to scheme in battle was very commendable, it was a pity that Ryudo was an expert in this field. How could Dunya's brain be as smart as a LVL5 wisdom monster? After hearing Dunya's somewhat unconvinced moan, Ryudo laughed and said, "You're already small in stature. Every time you encounter an expert in grappling, you'll be in trouble. I don't want you to be hugged by others like this. Other people won't be as gentle as me." When he said the word gentle, Ryudo's free hand started to fly around like an agile airplane. From time to time, he would stop at the airport to tidy up the runway. At the same time, the curve of his mouth became wider and wider. Actually, recently Ryudo was more or less in a state of loneliness. Especially yesterday, when he was in Union's room with her for a while. However, because it was a special period, he was unable to explore it. This caused him to have a stomach full of strange things. At this moment, Dunya delivered herself to his doorstep. Moreover, she was defeated by him. Therefore, she had to accept the punishment. Puff puff puff. If there was no soft and juicy peach to eat, the crisp and sweet plum was also good. Compared to the ripe peach, it was another flavor. Ryudo liked to eat fruits very much, especially peach, apple and plum. Every time he ate it, he would never get tired of it. The unique fragrance and soft and crisp texture were really satisfying. After feeling the wonderful atmosphere, Dunya's pretty face changed, and she quickly said, "Wait, this is the roof of my house. Don't do it here." Speaking of which, Dunya didn't have any opinion about Ryudo's behavior of eating plum. She even liked it. The problem was that the timing here was not right. The two were now in the Saito Guild Hall headquarters. Although it was a quiet top floor with no people, this place was open air. It was like using the sky as a blanket and fighting in the wild. Moreover, the bottom floor of this building was crowded with people. Thousands of Guild Hall students were also training hard on each floor. Below, there were also people like Wu Hong and Kazuma who were rushing up. They could arrive here at any time. In this situation, Ryudo was actually interested. This made Dunya's face redder. Moreover, she also began to struggle violently, trying to twist this guy's rising dragon bind. Of course, Dunya's movements didn't help the situation at all. On the contrary, it made Ryudo's appetite even more. He wanted to taste the crisp and sweet plum that he hadn't tasted for a long time. However, just as Dunya thought, she and Ryudo had been fighting on this roof for a while. Below, including Wu Hong and Kazuma, people should have reacted and went upstairs. Therefore, Just when Ryudo was pulling Dunya step by step into the abyss of hell, and was preparing to eat, there was a burst of urgent footsteps from the stairs not far away. Woo! Woo! They're here! Let me tidy up, don't. Just when Dunya wanted to hurriedly stand up from the ground to tidy up and run, Ryudo hugged her and rushed with lightning speed to the side of a storeroom at the corner of the roof. This storeroom was a place that Ryudo already had his eyes on. The door here was locked from the outside with a simple lock. First, he stuffed Dunya into the storeroom through the small ventilation window. Then he slid in like a loach. The advantage of doing this was that when the two entered the storeroom, from the outside, it still looked like the storeroom was locked from the outside. No one would expect that there would be two busy people hiding inside. Busy, they were really busy. They were so busy that their mouths were watering, their chests were stuffy, and their bodies were sweating. Just when the two people in the storeroom were busy with their survival plan, and had no time to care about others, the door to the 9th floor of the building was pushed open from the outside. Wu Hong and Ikima brought a group of people and rushed up. Looking carefully, Wu Hong's body was covered in dust and injuries. It was obvious that the man's trial just now really made the current president suffer a lot. But after announcing his failure, Wu Hong hurriedly rushed to the roof. After all, he knew that his daughter Dunya was going to challenge his future son-in-law Ryudo. Such a big show, how could Wu Hong miss it? Of course, he had to see how exaggerated his son-in-law's strength was. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to brag in the future. But when Wu Hong brought a group of people to see how his daughter and son-in-law were going to compete, they were greeted with an empty arena and some faint traces of battle on the arena. Whoosh! A cold wind blew, making people shiver. Where is everyone? That's it. Don't tell me it's over so soon. Seeing that there was no one on the arena, Wu Hong couldn't help but frown. But even if the two people over there had already competed, where were they now? Wu Hong looked around. The spacious Saito Guildhall headquarters rooftop area didn't have the two familiar figures. The few warehouses, living rooms, and temporary rooms that could hide people were all locked from the outside. The locks were still hanging properly. It seems that they have left. After finding that there was no sign of his son and daughter-in-law, Ikima came to his old friend and patted him on the shoulder. Sigh. Suddenly Wu Hong had to sigh and said, "It's really a mistake. If I had known this, I wouldn't have done that man's trial. I missed a great battle." Wu Hong was also a top martial artist. From the residual momentum and traces on the arena, it was not difficult for him to imagine how fierce the fight between his daughter and son-in-law was not long ago. Such a fierce battle. As a martial artist, he naturally wanted to see it with his own eyes. After watching it, he would benefit a lot. But since Dunya and Ryudo had already finished, Wu Hong and Ikima had to go downstairs to the living room to discuss the details of the two children's marriage. As for the storeroom that was locked from the outside, no one thought that someone had entered it. What kind of great battle happened in it? Only Heaven, Earth, Ryudo, and Dunya knew. 2 hours later, the sun had completely risen, and the roof of the Saito Guildhall headquarters was illuminated. Kacha! The lock outside the storeroom was shaken by a hand in the room, and it directly shook into two halves and fell to the ground. The door opened, and Ryudo walked out with a satisfied expression. Beside him was Dunya, who was wearing an exquisite rose gold ring inlaid with diamonds. Her face was flushed, and there were faint sweat stains on her forehead. Within 2 hours, it was unknown what kind of competition the two of them had in the room. Perhaps it was a competition of inner strength, or perhaps it was a competition of physical strength, or perhaps it was a competition of speed, or perhaps it was a competition of tenacity. In short, this fight was much more difficult than the previous fight in the ring. But although it was hard, Ryudo was a martial artist, and Dunya was also a martial artist. Everyone was a martial artist, so naturally, they were not afraid of this hard work. Even Ryudo wanted to stay in the storeroom longer. Before leaving, Dunya looked at the person next to her, who was reluctant to leave the storeroom, and always looked back. She couldn't help but laugh. "Is it comfortable to stay in there?" Ryudo smacked his lips and said, "Hiss, it's comfortable, it's really comfortable. I don't want to come out after going in." As this person said, His face was full of aftertaste, like a pig that had just eaten cabbage. Dunya asked in confusion, "Hey? Is the storeroom so good? Don't you think it's narrow? It's not good to turn around. The air is also very stuffy. And the walls are also strange." Ryudo also asked in confusion, "Storeroom? You're asking about the storeroom? Go away. Go to hell." The moment she reacted, Dunya couldn't help but pounce on Ryudo and beat him fiercely. She was like a cute kitten that was angry, but rushed to its owner with a red face. Chapter 374. That night, when Ryudo and Kazuma returned home in the starry night, it was almost early in the morning. How should they put it? In short, discussing the details of this wedding was much more tiring than they had imagined. According to Saito Takahiro and other members of the hall, the wedding should be carried out according to the traditional Japanese wedding. After all, the Saito family was an ancient family with a long tradition. It was not strange for them to make such a request. But the problem was that Dunya suddenly appeared after knowing about it. She directly rejected the family's proposal and asked Ryudo to marry her in a Russian wedding. In Dunya's words, when she went to Moscow with her mother Ovila to attend other people's wedding, Ovila looked at the Russian wedding dress on the bride and said with a smile that she wanted to see her daughter wearing such a dress. Although Ovila was no longer around, Dunya still had to fulfill her mother's last wish, which was to hold a wedding where she could wear a Russian wedding dress. Of course, Dunya's proposal, in the traditional and old-fashioned Saito family, was naturally impossible to pass. How could the ancient Saito family allow their eldest daughter to marry in the northern Russian wedding ceremony? Therefore, the family members who heard this broke out violent resistance, until they were suppressed by Dunya alone. It was too scary. The scene at that time was really scary. At that time, Ryudo and Kazuma were sitting in the VIP seats, watching the eldest daughter of the Saito family go crazy in public, and beat up the relatives who did not agree to hold a Russian wedding one by one. Most of the relatives of the Saito family were martial artists, and they were all famous in the martial arts world. They were very powerful martial artists, but such a group of martial artists were like paper in front of Dunya, and no one could even block her punch. Amidst the noisy crowd, Dunya was like an elephant that had rushed into a crowd of people. A casual punch from her could send people flying more than 10 meters away, and she even knocked down several people in the air. It was like watching an action movie, but it was also a matter of course. Although Ryudo suffered a lot of punches from Dunya when he fought with her, this silver violent bear's punch was not something that ordinary creatures could take. It was easy to break bones with one punch. At least 50 or 60 people were beaten, until their limbs were broken, and even the ambulance was called. Dunya stood on the podium and shouted to the crowd below, "You guys, if you don't agree, this young lady will break all your legs. Then I will sever the relationship with you. Do you agree or not?" "Yes, agree. Strongly agree." Suddenly, the relatives with bruises on their faces under the stage nodded quickly. They raised their hands faster than anyone else, which was the essence of France. What a joke, don't agree. If they didn't agree, wouldn't they be courting death? She really had the heart to break their legs, and it would be considered as her loss if they lost even 1 point. So when everyone saw the power of their young lady, no one dared to say a word to her at this time. They could only helplessly agree to Dunya's proposal of a Russian-style wedding. This was also something that couldn't be helped. After all, the Saito Guild had always respected strength. In the past, Saito was so arrogant and overbearing, but he could have such a high status in the family because his fist was big enough and his strength was strong enough. Now that Dunya's strength had surpassed Saito's, coupled with her violent personality, even Wu Hong didn't dare to say anything to his daughter, lest he be punched to the ceiling and never come back down. However, after seeing today's scene where the marriage proposal scene turned into a gang fight scene, Itsuma couldn't help but remind on the way back, Dunya's personality is more or less. You have to be careful in the future. Itsuma was also considering his son's face. He didn't say the words more or less violent, but his meaning was more or less like that. After all, no matter who it was, After seeing such a daughter-in-law who beat up 50 to 60 relatives on the spot, they couldn't help but feel secretly frightened. Fortunately, Itsuma was used to seeing the world, otherwise, he might have fainted on the spot. But Ryudo shook his head, smiled and said, "It's okay, she's only fierce to outsiders, but she's very kind to me." That's the best. Although Ryudo didn't have any special reaction to Dunya's fierceness, Itsuma still had some lingering fear in his heart. It had to be said that among the three daughters-in-law, the one that Itsuma didn't have to worry about the most was still the little girl from Kamiyoshi, Colored Glaze. After all, Colored Glaze was born in the strict Kamiyoshi clan since young. Not only was she well-educated, she was also meticulous in her thinking, and she was also quite outstanding in terms of etiquette, so she wouldn't do something like beating up relatives in public. So compared to Yunyen, who loved excitement and was rebellious, and Dunya, who was like a panda turned into a spirit, Itsuma still valued Colored Glaze more as his daughter-in-law. In the future, when Ryudo's side settled down, he would definitely let Colored Glaze take care of things, while Yunyen and Dunya would still be in charge of taking care of the children, and the other would be in charge of fighting. Before resting that night, Itsuma couldn't help but let out a deep sigh of relief. The past 2 days of going to Tsukuminari Villa and Saito Guildhall headquarters were simply too tiring. But fortunately, tomorrow's Kamishiro Imperial Garden would be the last stop. As long as he settled the matters with the Kamiyoshi clan, Itsuma would be able to free himself. Besides, compared to the Tsukuminari family and the Saito family, which were two strange families with one scholar and one warrior, the Kamiyoshi clan should be easier to deal with, right? Itsuma couldn't help but let out a relieved smile when he thought of Lady Ruehue and Lady Colored Glaze's dignified and elegant appearances. However, what Itsuma didn't expect was that tomorrow's marriage proposal ceremony in Kamishiro Imperial Garden would be the most troublesome, because the in-law on the other side suddenly disappeared. That's right, disappeared. And the name of the in-law who disappeared was Lady Ruehue Kaneshiro. No one could have predicted that the head of the Kamiyoshi clan would suddenly disappear. Itsuma and Ryudo only received this piece of information when they arrived at the dignified and elegant Kamishiro Imperial Garden the next day. What did you say? Lady Ruehue disappeared? Did she go to the washroom? After hearing the old butler's words, Ryudo couldn't help but scratch the back of his head, as if he didn't understand the severity of the problem. Bang! Instantly Lu Li, who was beside him, couldn't help but knock on his head. She said angrily, "Go to hell. Mother has disappeared for a few hours already. We just found out." Because of Ruehue's sudden disappearance, the Kamiyoshi clan was more or less anxious, and everyone was anxiously looking for the head of the clan. However, Ruehue's disappearance seemed to have been premeditated. She actually built a tunnel in her room that led to the outside world and secretly slipped away. Coincidentally, it was the same day that Ryudo and his son came to propose marriage. Now that the in-law's mother suddenly ran away, the father and son who came to propose marriage were stunned. It was also thanks to a gentle-looking woman who looked similar to Ruehue and Colored Glaze that the father and son didn't continue to stay in front of the Kamishiro Imperial Garden like statues. "Sorry, the family is in chaos right now. Please forgive me for not being a good host." After the father and son were welcomed in, the woman who looked slightly younger than Ruehue and slightly older than Colored Glaze, the current head of the Kamiyoshi clan, Jinyan Kaneshiro, said to the two with a bitter smile. Speaking of which, this was Ryudo's first time meeting the head of the Kamiyoshi clan, who was also the last Zaiwang of the Kamiyoshi clan. Jinyan Kaneshiro was Ruehue Kaneshiro's younger sister, Colored Glaze's aunt. She was also the one who was imprisoned in the Tenzai Shrine as a Zaiwang not long ago, and was also the one who was imprisoned as a living sacrifice. Normally, Jinyan Kaneshiro still had about half a year before she could be released from the Tenzai Shrine, until Colored Glaze turned 18 and went to the Tenzai Shrine to take over her position. The reason why Jinyan had been released half a year earlier was because her position as the House King had been completely abolished some time ago. The shackles on the women of the Kanzai family had finally been broken in the generation of the two sisters. The project to abolish the Zaiwang system started after Ruihui took over the position of Golden Heron and replaced the Ayase Shrine High Priest Takahara Shrine. In terms of the basic purpose, the Zaiwang system was actually beneficial for the Shinto religion to continue to establish its dominance. It was definitely beneficial for the upper class, but it was unfair to the women who were Zaiwang. Ruihui herself was one of the victims of the fast king system. After she ascended to the throne, she naturally used forceful means to abolish this rubbish system. She also killed a group of religious priests who came to protest. That was why Jingyan Kaneshiro was able to be released from prison early and live a normal life. By the way, I was able to be released early and Colored Glaze didn't have to go to prison anymore because of everyone's help. Thank you very much. Jingyan was well aware of how the Zaiwang system was abolished and how Ruihui became the Golden Heron. That was why she bowed slightly to Ryudo to express her gratitude. Jingyan was an elder after all. Ryudo hurriedly waved his hand and said, No. This is what I should do. But no matter how you look at it, it did shorten my term of office a little. Although this situation is not fair to my sister. Unfair to sister? Lady Ruihui? Yeah. Sister is the last Zaiwang of the Kamiyoshi clan to complete her term. I'm sure she had mixed feelings when she saw Colored Glaze preparing to get married. Jingyan couldn't help but sigh when she mentioned her sister. Chapter 375. Although Ruihui and Jingyan were sisters, Jingyan didn't really understand her sister. After all, there was a huge age gap between the two sisters, and they had only lived together for a short period of time. In the past few years, either Ruihui or Jingyan had been locked up in the Tenzai Shrine. It was like the two sisters took turns to be locked up, with one going in and the other coming out. But since a few days ago, when Ruihui learned that Long Do and Long Do were coming to propose marriage, her attitude became somewhat incomprehensible. Logically speaking, when a daughter was about to get married, a mother's feelings would be complicated. She would be reluctant to let her daughter leave her side, but she would also hope for her daughter's happiness. But Ruihui's situation wasn't like that. At least, from Jingyan's point of view, her sister seemed to be jealous. It was a bit laughable. A mother jealous of her daughter? Jealous of what? Jealous that her daughter could get married? Needless to say, there was really such a possibility. It wasn't that Jingyan didn't understand this feeling. After all, it was extremely difficult for a Kanzai family's daughter to get married in a normal way. It could be said that it was basically impossible. In the past few years, there weren't many women in the family who got married properly. Most of them would just find a random man to mate with and give birth to a few more daughters. Only women could inherit the position of Tenzai Shrine. Only by inheriting the position would the family have status. These rules were so strict that even a capable woman like Ruihui could not escape this fate. She could only be locked up alive for 20 years before being released. Furthermore, after being released, she was ordered to immediately find someone to breed with. Looking at it from this perspective, Jingyan could understand her older sister's feelings. It truly wasn't easy to marry someone you liked, especially in a trash family like the Kanzaki family. Of course, being jealous of her own daughter was a bit too much. So when Ryudo asked, where might Madame Ruihui have run off to? Jingyan was also too embarrassed to say that her sister might have run away, because she was jealous that her daughter had married well. She felt that it would bring shame to the Kamiyoshi family, and even make their ancestors crawl out of their graves in anger. However, since he couldn't get an answer from Jingyan and Colored Glaze was also confused, Ryudo could only think of a way to find it himself. After all, if Ruihui wasn't there, then the marriage proposal ceremony wouldn't be able to proceed. So Kazuma and Ryudo could only sit and wait in the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, which was quite awkward. But where would Ruihui go? In Ryudo's opinion, if it was a place that was easy to guess, then the group of guardian ninjas would have found it long ago, and Ryudo wouldn't have to look for it himself. In other words, Ruihui's current location was definitely a place that no one could easily guess. A place where Madame Ruihui could be, Generally speaking, a beauty like her would not wander around the streets, otherwise, she would have been discovered long ago. But if she wasn't on the streets, could it be? Suddenly, Ryudo seemed to have thought of two places where Ruehui might be. In the past few days after the battle with the Heavenly Eye group, Ryudo and Ruehui had talked about Ayam in private, including the time when Ruehui and Ayam stayed by the lakeside with a golden osmanthus tree. If Ruehui ran away from home, would she go to the lakeside to reminisce about the past? Thinking of this, Ryudo told Kazuma and Jingyan, and he quickly piloted the Wallace in the direction of the lakeside that Ruehui mentioned. Unfortunately, Ryudo flew around the lakeside for a while, but he still couldn't find any trace of Ruehui. She obviously wasn't here. If she wasn't here, then there was only one last place left. It shouldn't be, right? For Ryudo, there were only two special places he knew related to Ruehui. One was the lakeside where he spent some time with Ayam, and the other was the prison where Ruehui had the deepest resentment. Tenzai Shrine. Tenzai Shrine. This place was a nightmare for all Kamiyoshi women, and it was a nightmare that would last for at least 20 years. This place should also be a place that left a deep impression on Ruehui. After all, she had stayed there for 20 years. However, because the Zaiwang system had recently been abolished, the famous shrine was facing the fate of being demolished or changed into a tourist destination. But it shouldn't be implemented so soon. Thinking of this, Longdo quickly got on the Wallace and flew toward the Divine Palace that he had never been to before. But he had a rough idea of where it was. Tenzai Shrine wasn't located near Yodo City where Kanzai Imperial Garden was located, but far to the west in Kyoto. Strictly speaking, Tenzai Shrine didn't exist on its own. It was located at the northwest corner of Kyoto Imperial Garden, in the Shangjin district of Kyoto City. It was part of the entire Kyoto Imperial Garden, and was equivalent to a single room in a building. Kyoto was the administrative center during the Heian era. In the past 1,000 years, this place had been the residence of the emperors of the past. However, after the emperors moved to the new capital of Tokyo, Kyoto became a huge tourist attraction. Although Kyoto Imperial Garden had become a tourist attraction, there were still some important areas that were not open to the public, including Tenzai Shrine, where the previous Zaiwang served. However, although this place was called a shrine, it was actually just a small religious building with stone walls on the outside and white sand on the inside. It looked like it had gone through a long history and was covered with years of wind and frost. If Ryudo didn't know that this was the famous shrine, he might not have paid too much attention to it when he passed by. Anyway, it looked short and small, and it didn't have the grandeur that a shrine should have. At this time, there was no one around Kyoto Imperial Garden. The interior of Tenzai Shrine was a little messy because the staff inside had been driven away, resulting in no one to take care of it. In the quiet and dim space, there was no sign of life. There was only a familiar figure, kneeling in front of a statue in the depths of the shrine. It was a statue made of white jade. The size of the statue was similar to a real person, and it was doing something similar to a dance. Tenzai Shrine, although it wasn't the one in Kanzai Courtyard, the workmanship was almost the same as that one. Speaking of which, Ryudo more or less had some fate with this goddess. He would always remember how pitiful he looked when he was polishing the statue in front of colored glaze. However, the person who was looking up at the Tenzai Shrine statue wasn't colored glaze. Instead, it was the main culprit who had caused the Kamiyoshi clan to run away, Kanzai Ruehui. Actually, to Ruehui, why she came back here, and what she intended to do after coming back. She didn't even think about it. Right now, she was just staring blankly at the jade statue that she had seen so many times during her 20 years in prison that she wanted to vomit. She didn't think about anything, and she didn't do anything. It was as if every day and night had passed in this place. This feeling of emptiness was really annoying. After who knew how much time had passed, Ruehui couldn't help but sigh slightly. There was also a faint hint of anger on her face. Of course, Ruehui's anger wasn't directed at anything else, but at herself. Ruehui, the fool who suddenly abandoned everything and chose to run away without saying a word. She even turned off her phone. Ruehue's anger was directed at Ruehue. How could I do such a thing? Aren't I too shameless? Perhaps even Ruehue herself didn't know the reason why she did it. Before Ryudo and his son came to ask for her hand in marriage, Ruehue mysteriously got up from her bed. She felt as if there was a voice in her heart crying for her to run away. Ever since she was born, Ruehue had only followed her heart's voice twice. The first time was after she was abandoned by Iam. She followed her heart's voice and specially went overseas to have a test tube baby. The second time was before Colored Glaze and Ryudo got married. She followed her heart's voice and ran away from Kansai Imperial Garden without looking back. She came to this Tensai shrine. However, the former could be understood as a clear goal to fill the emptiness in her heart. However, the latter was more or less capricious. Ruehue never dreamed that this word would be used on her one day. Ever since she was in her 50s, she had never been capricious. After all, Ruehue was not capricious. As Kamiyoshi's daughter, as the Tensai Shrine's Tensai Shrine Empress, as the leader of the ruling family, she didn't have the right to be capricious. But how should she put it? When she clearly sensed that Colored Glaze was about to get married, Ruehue felt as if her heart was suddenly missing a corner. Her mind was also confused. When she came back to her senses, she was already here. She appeared in this prison where she had sat for 20 years. She sat there like an idiot, not knowing what to do. Tap, tap, tap. Just as Ruehue was thinking about what to do next, how to explain to her sister, daughter-in-laws and son-in-law why she did such a thing, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside. Is it the staff here who came back to get something? Because she knew that the Tensai Shrine had been abolished, Ruehue didn't think too much about it. Instead, she said without turning her head, "If there's anything you want to take, then do it. Just don't bother me." Suddenly, a young voice full of ridicule laughed and said, "Is that so? Then let's break this jade statue and take it away. It's a waste to leave it here anyway. We can even turn it into a bracelet and sell it for some money." The moment she heard this, Ruehue raised her eyebrows. She thought to herself, this staff member is so shameless. He even wants to take away the statue in the Divine Palace? Why don't we call the police and take him away? But then, her slightly turbid pupils suddenly widened. Obviously, she recognized the identity of this shameless fellow from this familiar voice. Thus, Ruehue hurriedly turned her head to take a look and saw Long Do's familiar figure walking over with a strange smile. This caused the former Tensai king to be stunned. After all, although Ruehue didn't expect someone to find her, she didn't expect this person to be Ryudo. Chapter 376. After entering the depths of the palace, he saw Ruehue's surprised face. Long Do, on the other hand, unceremoniously sat down beside her, and also raised his head to look at the statue of heavenly charms. "I'm guessing you didn't come here because you missed the past, right?" After looking at it for a second, Ryudo asked in a relaxed tone. Although he didn't know why Ruehue came here, Ryudo didn't need to look to know that she didn't like this kind of place. What Tianjai Divine Palace? What Tianjai King? To put it bluntly, it was just a small shabby room with a small shabby idol inside. Staying in this damned place for 20 years was no different from going to jail. In fact, it might be worse than going to jail. Therefore, Ruehue must have come here for some other reason. When she saw Ryudo, she was silent for a while, and then whispered, "Ryudo-kun, in your eyes, what kind of person am I?" Ruehue's voice was low and hollow, as if she was going to fly to heaven in the next second. If he didn't know that her body was stronger than a cow, Ryudo would think that she had some kind of terminal illness. So facing this strange question, Ryudo said honestly, "A very respectable elder, a very trustworthy ally, and a very charming woman." The last sentence, with Ryudo's identity, shouldn't be said, but he couldn't help but say it. After all, from the first time he saw Ruehue, Ryudo knew that he was mesmerized by this woman. In terms of identity, it shouldn't be, but people's hearts were like this. It didn't mean that they wouldn't think about things that they shouldn't think about. Especially after so many things happened later, including the knee pillow in the Kamishiro villa, and the accidental coma and hug in the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, Ryuta sometimes found it even harder to treat Ruehui as a simple elder. There wasn't a single wrinkle on her face, and her appearance and temperament were more mature than Lu Li's. Especially after taking the pill, her skin had become tender, firm, and elastic. No matter how one looked at it, she didn't look like an old woman of her age. For such a world-class beauty, if there was any man who didn't think she was charming, then there was probably something wrong with that man. So Ryuto's words were very honest, and it was obvious that it came from the bottom of his heart. When Ruehui heard this, she smiled and said, "You can see it clearly. Unfortunately, I'm confused now." Confused? What do you mean? In other words, I've lost my way on the road of life? No. I should say that I have never found my own direction. Ruehui couldn't help but sigh when she said this. In Ruehui's eyes, her life was a complete failure, a farce, because this stupid woman had never lived for herself for a single day. Ever since she was young, her mother had taught her that as the eldest daughter of the Kamiyoshi family, she had to give up everything for the family. Alright, Ruehui gave it up. She gave up all of her youth, and gave up all of the rights that young people should have. She openly carried out her role as the eldest daughter of the Kamishiro family. When the curtains finally fell on Ruehui's identity as the eldest daughter of the Kamishiro family, she quickly received new roles: mother of the colored glaze, and head of the Kamiyoshi family. As a mother, Ruehui felt that she did her best for the colored glaze. She didn't dare to slack off for over 10 years. Similarly, as a head of the family, Ruehui was even more dedicated. Even when she knew that she was about to die from a terminal illness, she still didn't forget to arrange things for her after death. By now, anyone would be satisfied with the 3 roles that Ruehui played. She was a perfect daughter of the Kamiyoshi family that they were proud of. She was a perfect mother that her daughter was proud of. She was a perfect head of the family that everyone praised. However, even though Ruehui had played so many roles, the only role that she hadn't played was the role of Ruehui Kamishiro. I can play any role that people praise, but I can't be myself, nor can I be myself. As time passed, Ruehui forgot who she was. It was as if she was locked in these roles, especially since her daughter was about to get married, and the Kamiyoshi family was about to come to an end. Time was about to return to normal, and she didn't know what she should do. She didn't need to worry about her family's matters anymore. She also didn't need to worry about her daughter's matters anymore. Then what else could Ruehui worry about in the future? What else did she want to do? Nothing at all. Ruehui was going to live a boring life of eating and waiting for death. Only now did Ruehui realize that she was just like a Kamiyoshi puppet. She seemed to be well dressed, but she didn't have a soul of her own. Ruehui couldn't help but smile wryly at this point. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Ruehui Kamishiro, who usually acts so wise and calm, actually has such strange thoughts. Although Ruehui said that, Ryuto didn't think that it was ridiculous at all. Instead, he felt that this woman in front of him was rather pitiful. Indeed, it wasn't just Ruehui who had forgotten who she was. Even Ryuto and Colored Glaze didn't think about probing into her inner thoughts. After all, in the eyes of Colored Glaze and Ryuto, Ruehui was a perfect mother and elder. As for other things, they didn't need to, and they wouldn't. But if even her closest daughter and son-in-law didn't want to probe into her inner thoughts, then who else in the world would? Who else would care about what this woman was thinking? Instantly, after sensing Ruehui's helplessness and confusion, Ryuto stood up and said, "Since you've realized it now, then leave the rest of your time for yourself and live for yourself again. It's a good thing. Live for myself again." Hearing this, Ruehui also stood up and said, "How? Live for myself again?" In fact, from a physical point of view, Ruehui had already been reborn. After all, the pill she had taken before had the ability to change her body and cleanse her marrow. It directly pulled her body back to the age of a teenager. But rebirth didn't just depend on physical age. It also had to be changed psychologically. So Ryuto reached out and touched his chin, and asked, "Actually, you've stayed in this broken god palace for so long. Didn't you think of anything fun?" "I just wanted to leave as soon as possible," How could I care about whether it was fun or not? Is that so? Then try it now. The fun of life is everywhere. It just depends on whether you know how to find it or not. Speaking of this, Ryudo looked at the heavenly concubine statue in front of him, and a trace of nostalgia flashed in his eyes. He then went to the side, found a sharp sacrificial instrument from the messy sacrificial altar, and pulled Rue Hui's wrist to the front of the jade statue. Hiss! The moment Ryudo casually pulled her hand, Rue Hui couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat. Although he only pulled her wrist and didn't hold hands like a couple, this degree of contact was enough to make her feel confused. This was nothing. It was just a gesture of intimacy between a junior and an elder. There was nothing special about it. Seeing that Ryudo didn't have any special expression, Rue Hui could only comfort herself like this in her heart. But in the next moment, Ryudo put the sharp sacrificial instrument in Rue Hui's hand, held her wrist, and raised it to the face of the heavenly concubine statue. He smiled and said, "Come, try to draw a little turtle on this thing's face." Ha! After understanding the reason why Ryudo took the sharp sacrificial instrument, Rue Hui was stunned at first. Then she couldn't help but smile and said, "That? Ryudo-kun? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Scribbling in places that shouldn't be scribbled, and even scratching the face of the statue. Rue Hui had never done this kind of thing since she was young. After all, if she did it, she would inevitably be scolded and grounded by her mother. You see, you can't let go, right? Since you want to live for yourself again, then you have to find the mentality of when you were young. When you were young, did you never have the thought of breaking the rules and doing something that shouldn't be done? At this time, Ryudo was like a demon that wanted to drag people into hell, and he guided Rue Hui's ears. Breaking the rules? Doing something that shouldn't be done? The moment she heard this sentence, Rue Hui seemed to understand a little. To put it bluntly, humans were this kind of strange creatures. The more they shouldn't do something, the more they would feel happy doing it. As the eldest daughter of Kamiyoshi, Rue Hui was naturally taught to follow the rules since she was young. Not to mention drawing a little turtle on the statue, she didn't even have the experience of scribbling on the wall. After growing up, Rue Hui of course could scribble on the wall. As the ruler, she had the power to do anything. But just like a bird that had been locked in a cage for too long, even if the physical cage had been removed, the cage, in its heart, still existed. Regarding this principle, with Rue Hui's intelligence, she naturally understood. Ryudo, Koen's meaning is to let me break the shackles and find myself again. Then let's give it a try. After understanding, Rue Hui took a deep breath, and with Ryudo's help, she slashed the sharp sacrificial instrument in her hand on the heavenly staff statue. Zap! Accompanied by a sharp noise, a long scratch appeared on the face of the jade statue, and it looked like it was disfigured. This feeling is so good. Rue Hui looked at the statue that should have been spotless, should have been treated with respect, and had been passed down in this heavenly staff temple for hundreds of years, and condensed the entire history of her family, being destroyed by her own hands. But she felt a strong sense of pleasure in her heart. This was a very special kind of pleasure, the pleasure of breaking the taboo. When Rue Hui chose to break free from the shackles of her family, the shackles of the Shinto religion, and the shackles of the secular world, and did these things, the pressure that had accumulated in her heart, for who knew how many years, was released at the same time. And the pleasure of breaking free from the shackles of morality, and doing something against the rules, actually had a special term, and that was moral betrayal. Chapter 377. When the word moral sense was mentioned, most people would immediately think of something very bad. But in fact, the scope of this word was quite large. Any situation that violated the rules or morals, and could obtain pleasure from it, could be described as moral sense. Speaking of which, Rue Hui actually did some very evil things in the eyes of ordinary people. For example, recently, she used the identity of Golden Heron to wash the religious world with blood, killing almost all the diehards in the shrines and palaces and so on. But these actions were only based on the consideration of interests and standpoints. It had nothing to do with Rui Hui's personal preferences, and she didn't obtain any pleasure from it. Otherwise, she would become a murderous maniac, and she wasn't such a person. So, no matter how many things Rui Hui did before, how many things she did that violated the rules or morals, it had nothing to do with moral sense. It was just a conflict of standpoints. And the scene of Rui Hui using a sharp sacrificial tool to draw a little turtle on the jade statue was purely for fun, and it didn't involve any interests or standpoints. Was this action more serious than killing people? Definitely not. Was it moral? It was definitely immoral. After all, in Rui Hui's understanding, the statue was very sacred and inviolable, so how could it be used for such boring entertainment? But in the process of Rui Hui doing this, she seemed to find that her mood seemed to be a lot better, and the depression that seemed to be surrounding her dissipated a lot. After casually drawing a little turtle on the face of the heavenly demon statue, Rui Hui turned around and asked, "Ryudo, Kun, I drew." Rui Hui originally wanted to ask, "How did I draw?" But who knew that the moment she turned her head, she found that Ryudo's face was actually very close to her face. Thinking about it, now that Ryudo was standing beside Rui Hui, and his hand was holding her wrist, the two's bodies were naturally very close. In this situation, when Rui Hui turned her head, her face was only a fist away from Ryudo's face, and it was almost the distance that she could breathe on each other's face. The moment they noticed this, the two were stunned at the same time, and they stared at each other's face in close proximity. What a beautiful face. Speaking of which, it seemed to be the first time Ryudo stared at Rui Hui's face at such a close distance, especially after she ate the elixir and returned to her youth. Even at this distance, the skin on Rui Hui's face was still delicate and flawless, tender and beautiful like a blooming flower. Coupled with her perfect facial features and her feminine charm, it was hard to imagine that she was a woman in her 50s. At the same time, Rui Hui also sensed the strong masculine scent on Ryudo at close range. This familiar smell and feeling reminded her of the unprecedented detoxification incident in the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. In fact, after the detoxification incident, Rui Hui had cursed herself countless times for being such a shameless woman. Speaking of which, although Ryudo's situation was critical at that time, it wasn't to the point that Rui Hui had to do it personally. It was actually just that she had a need in this area, so she waited for the opportunity to act, and she acted happily. After all, Rui Hui was also a normal woman of the right age, and it was normal to have a need in that area. But the situation at that time was so ridiculous that she couldn't help but feel dizzy every time she thought about it. Now, the two suddenly came into close contact, and Rui Hui smelled the familiar scent again, and felt the touch of his solid body, causing this Kamiyoshi, who hadn't touched a man for a long time, to be unable to hold it in. Ugh. Back then, I was so embarrassed. When she thought of the scene at that time, Rui Hui felt a bang in her head, as if 100,000 fireworks exploded at the same time, and her brain was almost fried. Because she was too shocked, Rui Hui couldn't help but blush slightly, and she threw the sacrificial tool in her hand on the ground and said, "I'm tired of this. Is there anything else to play with?" "Is that so? Then try to break this whole jade statue. Breaking this kind of thing can relieve a lot of stress." Ryudo also felt that the atmosphere became a bit awkward, so he quickly changed the topic and took out a huge hammer from nowhere. He should have hurriedly bought it from the Krypton Gold store. Smashing it seems like a good idea. For such an interesting suggestion, Rui Hui naturally wouldn't refuse, so she picked up the hammer and with the help of Ryudo, hammered at the jade statue. Because the whole body of the statue was made of jade, its hardness was actually not that good. Rui Hui hammered a few times and Ryudo's 80 cheering, and quickly hammered down a hand. "What do you mean by 80 question mark? It's a custom. When my hometown moves the hammer, they will shout 80. What a strange custom." Although Rui Hui secretly complained, she still silently recited this strange number in her heart. Bang, 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 rip, crack. As Rui Hui and Ryudo played more and more in the Tianjai Divine Palace, unknowingly, They broke the precious statue, tore the ancient scriptures, and broke the sacrificial tools that had been passed down for many years. In less than half an hour, the divine palace was already a mess. At first glance, it looked like a garbage dump, showing how much fun the two of them had. Phew! Ha ha, ha 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 ha. When Rue Hui finally came back to her senses, she couldn't help but let out a happy laugh, as if she had obtained great satisfaction from the happy activity of the brat tearing down the house. At this time, Ryudo, who had poured a pile of kerosene inside the divine palace, walked over with a lighter and smiled at Rue Hui. Okay, the last step. Directly send him to the sky with a fire. In the future, this damned place has nothing to do with you. But this divine palace is connected to the Kyoto Imperial Garden next to it. If this is burned, this damned place is not your home. Burning it won't do you any harm. What are you afraid of? Seeing that Rue Hui was still a little hesitant, Ryudo forced the lighter into her hand and showed a forthright smile. This close smile moved Rue Hui. She looked at the lighter in her hand, then looked at Ryudo's face, and for a moment, she couldn't tell which side of the fire was more ferocious. Therefore, under Ryudo's support enticement, Rue Hui lit the lighter and burned the entire Tianjai Divine Palace to the ground. The flames, along with the kerosene that Ryudo had scattered, burned fiercely, illuminating the dark interior of the Divine Palace. Rue Hui stood at the door, watching the Divine Palace that had restrained her youth slowly being engulfed by the red lotus fire, and her eyes began to flicker slightly. In the rising air, she seemed to have returned to a few decades ago, to the countless torturous nights she had spent in this damned place. As the flames sublimated, Rue Hui also felt her already cold body and heart gradually become hot, as if her youth that had been buried here was burned away by the flames and returned to where it should be. Let's go! Seeing that the fire was getting bigger and bigger, Ryudo pulled Rue Hui's wrist, wanting to take her away from here. But Rue Hui shook her head, smiled, and said, "Wait, Ryudo-kun, I still have something to do." "What is it?" Just close your eyes first. This kind of thing is a little embarrassing." Looking at the smiling woman in front of him, although Ryudo didn't know what she was planning, he could only obediently close his eyes. What does Madame Rue Hui want to do? Since he couldn't let me see it, it must be something very obscene. For example, doing something indecent in the burning divine palace? Doing a striptease or something. Thinking of this, Ryudo's face unconsciously blushed, because it was hard for him to imagine that the usually dignified and elegant Madame Rue Hui would do something strange in this sacred place. But in reality, after Ryudo closed his eyes, he only felt a noble fragrance slowly approaching, and there was a strange feeling on his mouth. It was quite comfortable, like something smooth like jelly was gently pressed against his mouth, and then quickly retreated. This feeling is. Ryudo wasn't a virgin, so he naturally knew what this strange feeling meant. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Rue Hui looking at him with a smile, squinting her eyes. "There's something on your mouth. I helped you wipe it, now it looks much better." After saying that, she hummed a song and walked out with light steps. It was as if the raging fire behind her had become frivolous and playful. "Ah, my mouth. Oh, okay, thank you very much. So she just helped me wipe it." Looking at Rue Hui's leisurely back, Ryudo first unconsciously thanked her, and then quickly followed. But thinking about it carefully, was it really the touch of fingers or handkerchief? That soft jelly feeling? And the breath that was close to the limit? Aren't they all a little familiar? Ryudo didn't dare to think about it, and he didn't dare to ask. He could only drive the Wallace and bring Rue Hui, who seemed to be in a good mood, back to the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. "Mother, where did you go? You scared us to death." Seeing Rue Hui appear in the main hall, Colored Glaze, who was scared half to death by her sudden disappearance, couldn't help but run over and hug the woman who just did something big. Okay, you're about to get married, but you're still like a child, crying when you don't see anyone." After patting her daughter's back and smiling, Rue Hui looked at Ryudo, who was explaining to Jingyan and Yima. Slurp. Rue Hui couldn't help but lick her lips, and a sly look appeared in her eyes. So this is the legendary feeling of carrying someone. It feels pretty good. I should try it more in the future. Hee hee, but I have to carry colored glaze. Holding her beloved daughter in her arms, and looking at her daughter's future husband, Rue Hui couldn't help but think. At the same time, she felt like she suddenly became a lot younger, in all aspects. Chapter 378. After Rue Hui returned, the rest of the matters were easily resolved. She quickly and easily discussed with her in-law Kazuma about the situation of the two children's weddings. She also easily helped Kazuma solve many problems in the blink of an eye. For example, the Kamiyoshi family requested a Japanese wedding, the Saito family requested a Russian wedding, and the Tsukujiri family requested a Western wedding. These three families each had their own groups of guests, and each had their own needs. Since this was the first mass wedding after the law was changed, it was 3 times more difficult to organize than a normal wedding. Especially when it came to preparation, it was practically hellish. It could be a complete mess at any moment. Regarding this, Rue Hui's solution was the mixed wedding method. The core idea was that after being together for a long time, they would separate for a long time. And after being separated for a long time, they would reunite. Although it sounded complicated, the core of this solution was that the Kanzaki, Tsukujiri, and Saito families would prepare their own Japanese, Western, and Russian weddings in 3 different locations. Normally speaking, no matter what kind of wedding it was, there would be a few common processes. For example, welcoming the bride, welcoming the guests, giving a speech, exchanging rings, cutting the cake, toasting each table, and so on. Because the 3 families chose different wedding methods, they couldn't hold them together. In that case, they could have Ryudo appear at all 3 weddings at different times. For example, our Kamiyoshi family's wedding will be at 11:40 a.m. Then, the Tsukujiri family's wedding will be at 12:20 a.m. And the Saito family's wedding will be at 12:20 a.m. Ryudo, Koen can go to the first and then the second. After all 3 families' ceremonies are over, they can all gather and have a final group photo together. I see. That's a good idea. After hearing Rue Hui's words, Kazuma couldn't help but nod. Speaking of which, Kazuma was already having a hard time thinking about how to prepare for these 3 weddings. After all, he was an extreme gangster. He had never prepared a wedding before, especially when it came to the weddings of 3 rich families. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Now with Rue Hui's suggestion, things were much simpler. Next, she would be in charge of negotiating with Tsukimi and Seita's family about the wedding day's schedule. She would see how to make Ryudo appear at various locations. Therefore, today's marriage proposal trip was actually the easiest one for Ima. He didn't even have to say anything, and Rue Hui had already made all the necessary arrangements. It was completely different from the chaotic situation when Sakimori and Saito were having their discussions. And so, before leaving, Kazuma couldn't help but say to Ryudo, "As expected of Madame Kanzaki, you truly are a heroine. Your workability truly makes me feel ashamed of my inferiority." "Is that so? That's great." Ryudo replied absent-mindedly after hearing his father's words. For some reason, Ryudo always had a strange look on his face during the marriage proposal ceremony. It was as if he had a lot on his mind, and it seemed that he didn't dare to look at Colored Glaze's face. And after the car had already driven for some distance, Ryudo realized that he forgot one thing. He actually forgot to give the new wedding ring to Colored Glaze. Before this, Ryudo personally put the wedding ring on Yunyen and Dunia's hands. Although he still had to return the ring on the wedding day and wear it again during the ceremony, he couldn't only owe the Colored Glaze. "Pops, I'm going back, you go home first." Thinking of this, Longdo quickly opened the car window, threw out a sentence, and flew out of the car window, leaving Ima staring at the car window in a daze with an expression of "you're crazy." At the same time, with the return of Ruehue and the departure of Kazuma and Ryudo, the Kanzaki Imperial Garden returned to its usual tranquility. Hee hee hee, la 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 la. After the guests left, Ruehui leisurely brewed tea in her small tea room. However, her younger sister, Jingyan, who was sitting opposite her, couldn't help but feel that something was wrong with her. Sis? Did something good happen today? Because she was too curious, Jingyan couldn't help but ask. According to what Jingyan knew, her sister should have been in a very complicated mood recently. Perhaps it was even a little bad, which was why she left early in the morning without saying goodbye. But when she was brought back by Ryudo, those complicated feelings were gone forever. She even felt like she had returned to her youth. Although it was a little strange, in Jingyan's opinion, her sister had indeed become much younger, especially in terms of temperament. Previously, Ruehue Kanzaki always gave people a feeling of magnanimity, calmness, elegance, and strictness. She was a woman who perfectly fit the role of Kanzaki Imperial Garden Master. She had a dignified aura without being angry, but now, the current leader of the Kamikaze clan was humming a song as she brewed tea. The corners of her mouth were curled up into an adorable smile, and her facial features had become much gentler. She was like a completely different person from the previous Ruehui. About this, it's probably because I've thought it through. I was too foolish before. After pouring tea for her sister, Ruehui couldn't help but shake her head. That's great. Can I ask what's the turning point that you've thought it through? I can't tell you that, even if it's you. Hee hee. When she saw the devilish smile on her elder sister's face, and sensed the lust of a young girl, Jing Yan immediately understood what the opportunity was. It was a man. It was definitely related to men. Gulp. Thinking of this, Jing Yan couldn't help but gulp. Speaking of which, how long has it been since my sister's husband passed away? No, speaking of which, do I really have a brother-in-law? Actually, Jing Yan had been confused about who Ruehue's husband was for many years. But even so, she was happy that her sister was able to open her heart and find true love again. However, while the two sisters were drinking tea and chatting in the tea room, a rapist suddenly appeared in Colored Glaze's room. Hey, I'm back. Not long after, Ryudo, who had sneaked back, opened Colored Glaze's window and jumped in. Colored Glaze was removing her makeup when she suddenly saw a figure push open the window and appear in front of her. She almost sprayed makeup remover all over her face. After barely managing to steady the liquid in her hand, Colored Glaze didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you crazy? You scared me. I hope you can call this a pleasant surprise. Instantly, Ryudo revealed a joyful smile at his fiancée. It seemed that seeing Colored Glaze's panicked appearance was very interesting to him. After that, he walked up to Colored Glaze and said with a smile, Actually, I came back because there's something else I want to do. What is it? Just close your eyes first. It's a bit embarrassing. What are you doing? We're already an old married couple. Although Luli said this on the surface, she still obediently closed her eyes. At the same time, she pouted her lips slightly with a come and kiss me gesture. Obviously, she roughly knew what Long Do wanted to do. Colored Glaze said that she didn't want to play this kind of game to increase the mood, but she was very honest in her heart. It was also because of her personality that Ryudo especially liked to tease her. But what Colored Glaze didn't expect was that in the next second, what welcomed her was not a passionate kiss, but the feeling of a warm and slightly rough object brushing across her lips. Without a doubt, this wasn't the feeling of lips, but of fingers. After opening her eyes, Colored Glaze looked at Ryudo, who was staring at her. She asked in annoyance and amusement, Can you explain what you're doing? Can you feel what just happened? Nonsense, can't you tell the difference between lips and fingers? At this point, Colored Glaze stretched out her slender white finger and brushed it across Ryudo's lips. Then, she leaned over and kissed him on the lips. She smiled and said, Can you tell now? It's not the same feeling at all. It's far from the same. Okay, I completely understand. Gulp. As Ryudo spoke, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and the expression on his face became more and more strange. However, he didn't tell Colored Glaze exactly what was strange about it. After all, this kind of thing couldn't be said even if he died. Otherwise, Colored Glaze might chop him into pieces on the spot. Perhaps wanting to change the topic, Ryudo immediately took out the wedding ring that he had prepared beforehand and put it on Colored Glaze's finger. But because he was a little uneasy, He put it on her middle finger. Did you come back to make fun of me? Looking at the ring on her middle finger, Colored Glaze couldn't help but extend her finger vertically to show her fiancé how luxurious this wedding ring was. Seeing Ryudo awkwardly put the ring on her finger again, Colored Glaze sighed and said, You forget it, let's talk about something serious. Something serious? Is there anything more important than our wedding? Immediately, Ryudo put his arm around his fiancé's shoulder and said in a flattering tone, as if he was trying to cover up his ugly behavior. Of course there is. Ahem. Yesterday Aunt Jingyan said that there are more women than men in the Kansai Imperial Garden, and the yang energy is thin, so it's better to have more people. Speaking of this, Colored Glaze's pretty face blushed slightly, obviously understanding what her aunt was hinting at. Of course, Jingyan's hint wasn't as simple as the Kamiyoshi family having fewer people. Now that the situation of Colored Glaze, Yunyen, and Dunya coexisting together was unavoidable, and seeing that Tsukiheim family's eldest daughter was pregnant, the Kamiyoshi and Saito families naturally didn't want their daughters to fall behind. From a certain point of view, this was a different kind of harem fight. Although this kind of harem fight was Ryudo's favorite, therefore, he immediately understood and carried Luli up from the chair. As he walked toward the bed, he smiled and said, I can do something to help. Why don't we start now? Wait. At least wait until nighttime, it's still big white. MMPH. Clang. The originally open window was now locked from the inside. The curtains on the future of the Kansai family's flourishing family were slowly being drawn from today onwards. Chapter 379. After Ryudo discussed the details of the wedding with the three major families, the only thing left was to prepare and invite the guests. Due to the fact that the four major organizers of this wedding, namely the Black Hand Alliance, Kamiyoshi Clan, Sakujiri Group, and Saito Club, had a very high status, the wedding venue was naturally as grand as possible, and there were as many guests as they wanted. In addition, because this was the first mass wedding after the marriage law was changed, the new family, including Ryudo and the three young misses, also received a lot of attention. Of course, it was mainly on the internet. People like to talk about all kinds of romantic affairs, so they were naturally quite happy to hear that Ryudo Kiryu was going to marry three beauties at once. Of course, only a few people sincerely congratulated Ryudo and the three beauties. Most of the netizens had always regarded Ryudo as the biggest scourge of the century because he ruined three national goddesses at once. Especially when people posted photos of the three young misses on the internet, it triggered a monstrous wave of crusades against the evil dragon. In just a few days, products such as Ryudo Kiryu Curse Doll, Ryudo Kiryu Death T-shirt, Ryudo Kiryu Stepping on the Carpet, and other venting products were flying everywhere on the internet, and the sales were skyrocketing. Someone even developed a game that Ryudo Kiryu's head explodes with a click of the mouse, and put it on the website. According to statistics, the total number of hits exceeded 1,000 trillion in 3 days, which showed how deep the resentment of the public was. However, while the anti-Ryudo wave was in full swing on the internet, Dragon products had already made a lot of money. At this time, Takahara Masato, who led the development of a series of Ryudo Kiryu venting products, was happily counting the money as he watched the company's sales soar. He laughed and scolded the group of idiots on the internet. Those guys are idiots. The boss's portrait rights are in our hands. Other than our company, who else would develop this kind of venting product? They hate the boss and give him money at the same time. They are so stupid. Gao Yuan shook his head, and then went back to urge the toy development team to continue to develop more Ryudo venting products. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to make more money. Just like this, the wedding of the century was about to begin. The night before the wedding, Ryudo received a special phone call. At this time, he was busy choosing a dress for the whole day, and he felt more tired than fighting a few fights. However, the voice that came from the phone made Long Do perk up all of a sudden. Hello. You are Ryudo-kun, it's been a while. A familiar voice that sounded somewhat cold came out of the phone. Ryudo only knew one woman with such a special voice, and there might not be a second one in the world. Rihana, are you okay? Recently? Sorry. I don't think I should ask about your whereabouts. When he received the call from the former Tenmu Group Guard Department, Rihana Tajima, Ryudo was stunned and asked a question out of curiosity, but he quickly took back his words. From a personal point of view, Ryudo and Rihana didn't have any personal grudges, and the relationship between the two was more or less subtle. But from a collective point of view, Ryudo and Rihana were still in a hostile state, or Rihana was still in a state of being hunted by them. When Ryudo's wedding was ready and was about to begin tomorrow, many people didn't notice that the Tenmu group, a monster that was once powerful enough to cover the sky with one hand, had quietly come to an end. With Ayam's disappearance, Huanan's death, Nikolai's betrayal, and the civil war with Rihana and Yomi, the Tenmu group was now torn apart, and most of them hid in the dark and migrated to other countries. But even so, the group of higher-ups who had done all kinds of evil in the group in the past couldn't escape punishment. For example, Rihana and Yomi, who were still alive among the 4 department heads, became wanted criminals and were marked with a huge bounty. Of course, Ryudo didn't think that Rihana would be caught or killed because of this. She wasn't that weak. It could only be said that Rihana might have to change her identity in the future to appear in this world. Naturally, she couldn't attend Ryudo's wedding openly. It's okay. Rihana smiled and said, I heard that you and Yunyan are getting married. I can't be there in person, but I'll still send a congratulatory gift. How about I give you a complete set of whip, candle and wooden horse? Are you kidding? Do you think Yunyan will? Ryudo wanted to say. Do you think Yunyan will be that kind of person? Who knew that he stopped halfway, because he knew that Yunyan might really be that kind of person. For Yunyan, who had always been a thrill seeker, if she discovered a new way to play, she would definitely happily try it out on Dragon Fight. Ryudo didn't want his cute wife to become an S or M, so he righteously rejected Rihana's gift. TSK, what an unromantic man. Rihana, who was rejected by Ryudo, seemed to feel that it was a pity, but she also changed the topic to a very special place. Speaking of which, after that you still couldn't find Lady Ayam, right? When Lady Ayam was mentioned, even Rihana couldn't help but sigh, so much so that she didn't even want to say the word corpse. Most of the members of the Heavenly Eye group were pulled into the group because of Ayam's personal charm. Rihana was one of the best among them, and she even had a special relationship with Ayam, which was not something that outsiders would know. Yes. Ryudo also sighed and said, that woman is really amazing. I don't know how she did it without leaving a corpse. Not even a strand of hair could be found. This was also a question that had troubled Ryudo for a long time. He really couldn't understand what had happened at that time. If Ayam was still alive, she would definitely reorganize the Heavenly Eye group and continue to fight for her ideals, but she didn't. Judging from the situation of the Heavenly Eye group being torn apart to such an extent, she was definitely no longer in this world. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to watch her years of painstaking effort being wasted. But if that woman was already dead, where was her corpse? Where did the corpse go? Because he was at the scene at that time, Ryudo was 100% sure that no one could take away Ayam's corpse from the buildings that were about to collapse and were surrounded by raging flames. That woman seemed to have turned into a butterfly in the raging flames and flew silently to hell. It was unbelievable. But at this moment, Rihana asked a question that made Ryudo's scalp tingle. Ryudo-kun, do you believe that the time tunnel or time travel really exists? The moment he heard this question, Ryudo trembled and almost dropped the phone in his hand. From a certain point of view, Rihana really asked the right person. After all, Ryudo himself had experienced time travel and was a transmigrator from another plane. How could he not believe that thing existed? But even so, Ryudo still replied with a dry smile. How is that possible? Do you want to say that Ayam didn't land on the ground when she fell down, but through some kind of time tunnel to another place? As he spoke, Ryudo unconsciously broke out in a cold sweat. Impossible, this kind of thing was impossible. Although he said so, he felt a little scared in his heart. He had to admit that Iam's situation was really too strange. Her body was installed with the most advanced semi-permanent biochip made by the Heavenly Eye Group. No matter where she went in the world, it would send back information. But even after Rahana used the Heavenly Eye Group tracking system, he couldn't track Iam's whereabouts. It was as if this person had directly turned into a phantom and disappeared from this world. Ryudo had personally experienced this kind of strange disappearance. In his previous life, he was inexplicably lying in bed reading a novel. When he came back to his senses, he had already appeared in the dilapidated warehouse with the sea breeze blowing. Logically speaking, since Ryudo was likely to transmigrate, then other people might also encounter the same situation. It can't be. Could it be? I am that guy. Just as Ryudo was thinking about this with cold sweat, Rahana on the other end of the phone sighed. That's right, it's the age of science now. Transmigrating to another time and space, or even having some kind of system after transmigrating, can only appear in those novels that don't talk about science. Ha. Ha 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 ha. That's really quite unscientific. Okay, in short, I will think about the gift again. I wish you and Yunyan a happy marriage. That's it. I will come back to play with you when I have time. Beep beep beep. When Rahana on the other end said that he would come back to play with Ryudo next time, and hung up the phone, Ryudo held the phone in his hand, that seemed to have become heavy and couldn't calm down for a long time. The woman who disappeared, Tenmu Iam. What's the situation now? Ryudo didn't dare to think about it. It was useless to think about it. In short, he only knew that he was about to have a grand wedding with the 3 female protagonists in the game Red Album 2. No survivors. And from then on, he would live a shameless life. As for other things, it had nothing to do with him. Unless that woman appeared in front of Ryudo again. Just like this, Ryudo put down the phone and returned to his room, waiting for the day that would make him the happiest man in the world. However, he didn't know if it was a coincidence or the will of the heavens, but when Ryudo closed the door of his room, a bolt of lightning struck down from the clouds in the distance, and coincidentally, it struck the almost abandoned unrestrained sky tower. Chaos as night fell, the dark chaos shrouded the world. In another area of chaos that was even darker, a woman lying on a chair slowly opened her Devil King's eyes. Chapter 380. In Buddhism, the 6th heaven was also known as the Parinirvana heaven. Seizing what he has transformed into to amuse himself, hence the saying, he has transformed into freedom. There was no doubt that the act of plundering others for one's own entertainment was quite vile, whether it was plundering material, emotional, or life. But to a certain woman, the desire to plunder was so strong that she couldn't control it. It was something that had long been integrated into her blood. Nighttime Tokyo port. Looking at the distant sea from the port, the first thing that came into view was naturally a huge bay. However, in the middle of the Gulf of Tokyo, on an artificial island several kilometers away from the coast, there was an incomparably huge tower standing tall. Those with a little insight would know very well that this was the headquarters of the multinational giant, Heavenly Eye Group, that spanned across many fields such as arms, medicine, and so on. And the name of the tower was Unfettered Sky Tower. The design of the Unfettered Sky Tower was quite strange and abstract. The 6 parts of the building were gradually connected to form the main body, and the spiral shape that kept extending upward was even more straight to the sky. Together with the height of 666 meters, it looked like some kind of strange religious base, not the headquarters of a company. Of course, no serious international company would go to the vast Gulf of Tokyo to artificially reclaim the sea to create an artificial island, and then move their company headquarters there. The only way to go or leave this unfettered sky tower was by helicopter. From the helipad on the top floor of the tower, all the way to the inside. After walking through a few long corridors, one would come to a spacious study. The study was extremely spacious, and the decoration style inside was very chaotic. The cute and childish girls' white walls were hung with rich watercolors of famous masters, and the solemn and elegant European-style white lacquer bookshelf was filled with all kinds of broken figurines. The floor of the study was covered with a saffiewood carpet made of silk, wool, and gold thread that was worth millions of dollars. And on this valuable carpet, there were traces of someone's spray paint. The style was chaotic, and the furnishings were overcrowded. It could be said that the desk was not matched with the bookcase was not matched with the carpet was not matched with the wall, and the wall was not matched with the desk. However, there was a benefit to this strange study. Anyone who stepped into this study would realize that they were definitely not dealing with a normal house owner. Of course, the owner of this place was the lady who was currently sitting on the large recliner with her eyes closed, as if she was in a trance. Although her brain wasn't normal, her appearance was definitely first class. She was wearing a very luxurious red dress. She did not wear any jewelry, and her face was not painted with any makeup. No matter how precious the jewels were, they couldn't match her temperament of looking down on the world. No matter how good the cosmetics were, they could only add to her unparalleled beauty. In short, the owner of the unfettered sky tower, Heaven I Am, was indeed a beauty that could drive any man crazy. However, this great beauty seemed to be sleeping soundly. At this moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed outside the window not far away. Kaboom! The lightning coincidentally struck the unfettered sky tower. The loud noise startled the sleeping beauty, and she slowly opened her eyes that seemed to be connected to the abyss. The moment she woke up, I Am narrowed her eyes slightly before closing them again. Am I dreaming? Or am I already dead? When she saw the familiar ceiling of the study, I Am's first reaction was that she was dreaming, or perhaps this place was hell. Speaking of which, it was strange because in I Am's mind, she should be a dead person. At the last moment of her life, what appeared in her Devil King eyes was a burning manor, a sweeping wind, a collapsing building, and a stinky man who reached his hand out to her. Humph. Humph humph humph. Such an ending is quite suitable for me, the last descendant of the Heaven Eye clan. Back then, the demon king of the sixth heaven had died in Hanoji. He had also died in the flames and collapsed buildings. Yongji had also died in the same way as her ancestor. It could be considered a kind of reincarnation. But just as I Am was thinking about this, the phone on the desk in front of her suddenly rang, interrupting her thoughts. Phone. Wait a minute. There are phones in hell. The moment the phone rang, I Am was stunned for a moment. Then, she casually picked up the phone, wanting to hear which demon wanted to spar with her. If you have something to say, spit it out quickly. Lord I Am, it's Yamamoto. I have something to report. A voice that didn't have much of a presence came from the phone, and reported a name that didn't have much of a presence. Yamamoto? Something to report? Hearing this, I Am finally realized that something was wrong. This phone was undoubtedly real. The man's voice on the other side of the phone was also real. The familiar office around her was also real, including herself. What's going on? I'm not dead. And who's this guy on the phone? Why does it sound so familiar? Speaking of which, I Am's memory was actually very good. She could easily remember almost everyone she had met since she was born. So she should be able to remember who the person on the other side of the phone was. But as far as she knew, the guy called Yamamoto, who seemed to be F***ked, every day should be an unlucky guy who had been dead for almost 2 years. His body should have turned into ashes. Why would he call her? Although she was somewhat confused, I Am hurriedly went into her daily work mode and said in a light tone, What's the matter? Just say it. Lord I Am, that brat Ryuto Kiryu seems to be getting restless. He seems to have noticed the existence of our Heavenly Eye group, and is planning to put on a show for Miss Kanzaki, blabber blabber blabber. As for what Yamamoto said on the other end of the phone, Yongji didn't pay attention to half of it. Her mind was filled with a bunch of what the F***C case mud horses galloping past. What was this? Was this the legendary transmigration? At this moment, I Am finally regained her senses. It seemed that she hadn't died. Instead, she had mysteriously returned to nearly 2 years ago, to the time when she had schemed against Ryuto and the colored glaze. I Am remembered clearly that tonight, the undercover agent she had arranged for in the Kamiyoshi clan, finally managed to kidnap Miss Colored Glaze, and then stuffed her into the Rulon Group's young master, Ryudo Kiryu. She was going to have Ryudo and Miss Colored Glaze develop some sort of relationship that went beyond friendship. Logically speaking, this was a good idea to kill two birds with one stone. On one hand, it could give the Kamiyoshi clan a huge blow. On the other hand, it could also kill Ryudo with a borrowed knife and completely control the Rulon group under the Heavenly Eye group. But what I also knew was that this plan had failed in the end. Ryudo, the young master she had always thought of as trash, just happened to become powerful from that night. Through a series of methods, he saved her and the Colored Glaze's lives. He even counterattacked the next day and eliminated all the undercover agents arranged by the Heavenly Eye group. Today was the first day that Ryudo Kiryu's soul had transmigrated. It was also the first day that Ayam was interested in Ryudo, and Ayam actually transmigrated from the day she was prepared to die in the manor to the day Ryudo transmigrated. This situation was so messy that she didn't know what to say. After a while, Yamamoto, who had finished his report, asked, "Ayam-sama, what should we do next?" "Inform advisor Sakata to find someone to kill him." "Yes, then I won't disturb you." Beep. After hanging up, the woman on the other side of the phone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Good heavens, did I become a transmigrator? In novels there are soul transmigration and body transmigration. Am I transmigrating or soul transmigrating? Thinking of this, Yongji lowered her head to look at the long slender legs that were exposed from under the long dress. Her legs were now moving freely, unlike the miserable state where it was difficult to move when she was about to die in the manor. Forget it, transmigrating is such a ridiculous thing. Let's not delve into other things. There's no point. Right, speaking of which, is there any special benefit for me as a transmigrator? It's in many novels, right? But just as Ayam was about to stand up and move around to think about what to do next, a strange sound effect suddenly rang in her mind. Beep 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 la 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 la. What's going on? Beep. Detected low-level transmigrators' low desire to have a pie in the sky. Pay-to-win fate-changing system, officially activated. Suddenly, Ayam's mind rang with this strange sound, and it seemed to be full of sarcasm. After that, a huge electronic screen floated in midair and suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. On this translucent electronic screen was written the words "Pay-to-win fate-changing system." These words made people speechless. Pay-to-win fate-changing system. Description: give those who wish to have a new life after transmigrating, but don't have the ability to do so, a dreamlike opportunity. This system's motto is, use money to create happiness. Play with your coins if you don't have money. If you don't have money, please don't. Ka-cha. Before the system finished its description, Ayam had already reached out and grabbed the translucent electronic screen. She pulled the screen closer to her face, as if she was grabbing a piece of glass. Who do you think you are talking to? Who is the low-level transmigrator? Who is the scum of society without the ability to do so? Ha! As Ayam spoke, she stuck her finger with red nail polish into the system screen. Her tone was full of threat, and her gaze was as if she was looking at a pile of trash. What is this thing? I am, the Heavenly Eye, the demon king of the sixth heaven in this world. You, a little system, dare to be impudent in front of me? Are you looking for death? Why don't you throw this thing down from a height of 666 meters? Or would it be better to find a pack of hungry wolfhounds and slowly eat them? Or just throw it into a meat grinder and grind it up? While grabbing the unknown system, Ayam's mind was already rapidly thinking about how to punish the system. As if it felt Ayam's killing intent, the system screen suddenly trembled, and the words on it immediately changed. Emergency adjustment. Emergency adjustment. This system is now officially renamed as Ayam-sama, I am your dog system. Description: this system will specially serve the great heavenly Ayam. Sama, Ayam-sama, unparalleled in the world, Ayam-sama, eternal God, Ayam-sama. This system is your loyal dog. Please order it as you wish, woof woof. That's more like it. Seeing that this Ayam-sama, I am your dog system, was quite tactful, I forgave it and opened the system interface to observe. At this time, I.M's personal interface looked like this: name, Heavenly I.M. age, 26 years old. Attributes: Wisdom LV5, Physique LV4, Courage LV5, Insight LV5, Charm LV5. Title: 6th Heavenly Demon. When equipped, can break through the attribute limit to LV6. Equipment: none. Total assets: US $666. 6 billion. Now I.M's basic interface was roughly like this. Under the attributes, there was a basic introduction. LV1, Human Scraps. LV2, Excellent Passerby. LV3, Professional Expert. LV4, International Warrior. LV5, Extreme Superman. LV6, Heavenly Demon Monarch. Chapter 381. What the hell is this? My stats are just too bad. After seeing her specific attributes, I.M couldn't help but squint, as if she was unhappy. So she asked the system, "Hey, these are all LV4 and LV5. Are you looking down on me, bastard? They should be at least LV99. Sorry, Lord I.M. LV5 is already the strongest human." The strongest human? I'm not a human. What does the strongest human have to do with me? I.M silently cursed. But when she saw her LV4 physique, she more or less knew why she lost to Ryudo. So my physique is only at LV4, International Warrior? That's too weak. Although I.M didn't like to fight with people personally, it didn't mean that she didn't learn some martial arts. It was just that she didn't improve, and it wasn't even registered in the skill bar. But when she was forced to a dead end by Ryudo, she realized that this was wrong. No matter how strong the Heavenly I group was, as long as they met an unreasonable expert like Ryudo, they would be on the verge of death the moment the two sides got close. After all, Ryudo's strength was too strong in the later stage. He had reached the true limit of humans. He was no different from Superman. This left a deep impression on I.M. So since she was reborn, I.M had to make up for her weakness. At this time, she also saw a small plus beside her 5 attributes. I.M curiously pressed the plus, and the system popped up a, "Do you want to increase the attribute level?" Increase the attribute level, so it can be increased directly. Originally, when she saw her Wisdom LV5, Physique LV4, Courage LV5, Insight LV5, Charm LV5 garbage attributes, I.M felt very unhappy. However, if he could level up through the system, it would be different. Unfortunately, he could only level it up to LV6. Why couldn't he level it up to LV99? What a pity. However, the moment I.M clicked yes, another message popped up from the system. Upgrading from LV4 Physique to LV5 Physique requires 5 billion renminbi. Confirm payment. The cost of increasing attributes, was so cheap. Only 5 billion? It was practically a free gift. Although I.M had already guessed that all the services in the system would cost money, 5 billion for one upgrade was too cheap. Who was I.M? She was the boss of the Heavenly I group, the weapons department, and pharmacy department. Under her were money printing machines. She had as much money as she wanted. Now, I.M had a total of 6 billion inch in her personal vault. And this was only the amount of money that I.M had put in her account for auspiciousness. If one were to talk about the true amount of money that I.M could move, it would be an astronomical figure. It was almost equivalent to the national budget. If it really only required 5 billion to increase attributes once, I.M could raise it to LV99. The prerequisite was that she was able to do so. Thinking to this point, I.M still clicked the confirm button. After clicking, I.M's total assets immediately decreased by 5 billion. But at the same time, her body underwent a huge change. She immediately felt as light as a swallow, as if every part of her body was within her control. At the same time, her body was filled with an unbelievable explosive power. This was the realm of LV5 Constitution, Extreme Superman. So that's how it was. I understand why I lost. It was because Ryudo, that bastard, also had this system. After feeling the benefits of the Constitution upgrade, I.M immediately understood how Ryudo defeated her. 2 years ago, Long Do was just a hooligan who was locked up in a warehouse and was on the verge of death. In just 2 years, he had already become a super monster who could dance on a mountain of blades and sea of fire. In such a short time, such a huge change. If it was said that Ryudo relied on his own training, then Iam would never believe it. But if it was bought by the system, then it could be explained. But since LV5 was already so strong, then what would LV6 be like? Thinking to this point, Iam continued to click on the plus next to LV5 Constitution. She wanted to see the situation after upgrading to LV6 Constitution, Demonic Monarch. From LV5 Constitution to LV6 Constitution requires Shattered Nation Jade. Suddenly, a strange message popped up in the system box. Shattered Nation Jade. What is this? Shattered Nation Jade. An item that can be obtained after destroying a country. It represents the end of a country. An item that can be obtained after destroying a country? It sounded interesting. If it was a normal person, this item that could easily destroy a country would be very difficult to obtain. But for Iam, it might not be the case. Their Heavenly Eye clan's mission was to destroy the world. Destroying a country was just a necessary part of the process. It was nothing, but at least Iam didn't have the Shattered Nation Jade, so she couldn't upgrade to LV6 for the time being. What a disappointment. Anyway, let's look at the shop. After knowing that her personal attributes couldn't be upgraded, Iam opened the shop and looked at the messy, hooligan series items and skill books. Oh, this is not bad. This is not bad. I want them all. Iam basically didn't look at the price when buying items. As long as she saw something she liked, she would buy it and happily play with it in her hands. Not long after, she spent tens of billions to buy all kinds of items and equipment. Then she turned to look at the skill books on the other side. There were so many skill books in the Krypton Gold shop that it felt like she had come to a museum of human skills. However, it was clear that Youngji wasn't interested in those ordinary skills. Instead, she turned her attention to the more bizarre items. What is this? Inner Force skill book. Maybe the system was too scared by Iam, but the Krypton Gold shop was now fully open. It didn't have to slowly open the shop like Ryudo. Among all the skill books, the Inner Force skill book was actually separated to browse. And the variety was much more than expected. What were the ordinary Inner Force skills? Qianquan Foundation skill, Body Strengthening skill, Youthful Rejuvenation skill, Heavenly Cycle skill, etc. What were the literary skills? Indian Secret Technique, Princess Divine Technique, Test of the 8 Extraordinary Meridians, Primitive Pill Subprescription Technique, etc. What were the stupid skills? Breathing Technique even monkeys can understand, Fasting Divine Technique for paupers, Death in situ for 10 seconds, Celestial Secret Oil Removal, etc. But although these Inner Force skill books looked very strange, to Iam, they were still not enough. They didn't suit her taste. So she asked directly, they all look too ordinary. Is there anything that can release a death ray from one's eyes, or shoot bullets from one's fingers after cultivation? Hearing this, the system was speechless. After being stunned for a while, it replied, recommended to purchase Demonic Disintegration Technique, Omnidirectional 8 Desolation Technique, Taoist Heart Demonic Seed Technique. Still too ordinary. Forget it. Anyway, these are the only things I can buy here. Although Iam wanted to buy a skill book that could turn her into an alien, she couldn't find it. She could only follow the system's recommendation and buy a bunch of Inner Force skill books. Sky Demon Disintegration Technique has been purchased. Proficiency 20%. Omnidirectional 6 Desolation Skill has been purchased. Proficiency 20%. Tao Heart Demon Seed Technique has been purchased. Proficiency 20%. Sunflower Manual has been purchased. Proficiency 20%. Looking at the pile of skills that suddenly appeared in her skill bar, Iam frowned and said, why is the proficiency only 20%? Buying a single skill book can only increase 20% proficiency. Please buy it again. But the books are gone after buying them. How can I buy them again? After death, the shop will refresh again. Please, slap. Without waiting for the system to finish, Iam gave it a big slap. I'll give you a chance. Say it again. Shiver, shiver, shiver. Beep. The shop has added a refresh option. Click to refresh the shop. After feeling IAMs, I'll tear you apart if you say another word attitude. The system could only tremble and add a custom function for her. That's more like it. IAM nodded. She seemed to be very satisfied with this retarded system. After that, it was another round of crazy shopping. IAM did not have anything else, but she had a lot of money. After a frenzied shopping spree, Youngji directly bought all the 20 over inner force skills that she had bought to the max level. And the chi opening rate column had already reached the limit of 999%. Tisk, it's only 999%. And it can't continue to increase? How boring. Lord IAM, the 999% chi opening rate is unprecedented. Your potential has now been developed to the point where it exceeds the limit. Is that so? Then I'm very strong now. Actually, even without the system's notification, IAM could feel the chi flowing in her body. In the end, the light force, dark force, and Dan force that martial artists cultivated were all within the 100% chi opening rate system. Youngji, on the other hand, now possessed an unprecedented 999% chi opening. The power of her blood chi had already reached the peak. If she went any further, she would be able to break through the void and become a saint. Yes, Lord IAM, you are now invincible. You can hit anyone with a punch, unless... Bang! Before the system's voice died away, IAM punched its display screen. With one punch, the system's display panel was directly punched through. It looked quite miserable. No, it doesn't feel good to hit this thing. Let's find a living person to try. It's not a bad idea to find him. After shaking her head, IAM turned off Lord IAM. I'm your dog system. She picked up the phone and said to the assistant on the other side, Go and inform Nicholas. Tell him to come back in 3 hours. I have something urgent to discuss. Chapter 382. For IAM, what she needed now was a human punching bag. And she had already decided on the identity of the human punching bag. That would be the head of the Heavenly Eye Group's weapons department, Nikolai. Don't misunderstand. IAM didn't mind Nikolai betraying her before, and even wanted to throw a bunch of bombs down to blow her up. IAM actually liked it when her subordinates betrayed her. What made her unhappy was that Nikolai's betrayal had no sense of beauty at all, and was simply disgusting. In IAM's mind, what was the scene of betrayal like? It was definitely her fighting in the front while Nikolai stabbed her in the back. After the stab, he would laugh and say, You didn't expect this, did you? I'm a traitor. I've wanted to kill you for a long time. But what did Nikolai do when he threw a bomb down to kill IAM? He didn't say anything, and just threw a bomb down to carry out a carpet bombing. What was the point of that? At least when he threw the bomb down, he should have used the loudspeaker to shout at IAM, who was in the manor below, right? He would be considered qualified if he shouted a few words. Such a betrayal with no sense of beauty made IAM, who was very strict in this aspect, very unhappy. So she decided to let Nikolai know what a real betrayal was. Just like that, after Youngji made this call, Nicholas, who was far away in a foreign country at this time, hurriedly rushed over here. As the head of the Heavenly Eye Group's weapons department, Nikolai's daily tasks were very busy, and he often had to discuss arms deals with various organizations overseas. But IAM was the head of the Heavenly Eye Group after all. And after this call, Nikolai rushed over to the unrestrained Sky Tower, as fast as he could even if he was far away in a foreign country. Really, I don't know what urgent matter Lady IAM is looking for me for, but at least let me know in advance. After flying back in the supersonic plane at the fastest speed, it was already the morning of the second day. Even though he was tired from the journey, Nikolai still hurried to IAM's study after getting off the plane, afraid that he would exceed the 3-hour time limit. No problem. Only 2 hours and 50 minutes had passed since the call ended. There were still 10 minutes left. When he knocked on the door of Madame IAM's study, Nikolai thought with relief. Come in. Yes. Nikolai pushed open the door after getting permission, and walked in with a straight step, and asked, Lord Youngji, you Before he finished speaking, a fishing net suddenly fell from the sky. It directly covered Nicholas, who had just entered the door. What? The fishing net seemed to have a strong stickiness. When it wrapped around Nicholas's body, it was still tightly wrapped around his body. The Minister of Arms could not even lift his arms. He could only be tied up like a dumpling and fall to the ground. Lady, I am. Do you have any misunderstandings about me? Looking at the figure slowly walking towards him, Nicholas asked in a puzzled tone. From Nikolai's point of view, he was truly innocent. Not long ago, I was still running around everywhere for you. And one phone call from you made me fly all the way back. In the end, when I came back, I was directly served with a fishing net? What did I do to offend you? However, after Ayam walked over with a smile, she pulled up the fishing net and hung Nikolai's body in the air. She smiled and said, "You didn't offend me, at least not now." Then why did you? No reason. I just want you to know what betrayal is. What? What does that mean? Betrayal? Just when Nicholas was racking his brains, but still couldn't figure out the meaning of this sentence, Yongji elegantly stretched out a finger and directly tapped on his wrist shoulder. How much power could a single finger have? At most, it would just be a scratch. But the moment Ayam's finger touched him, Nikolai felt as if his shoulder was directly pierced by an iron nail, and the puncture point went straight into his bone marrow. Ugh! Aha! The intense pain rushed into his brain, and Nikolai could not help but roar loudly. But this miserable scream did not arouse Ayam's pity at all. She did not have such a thing as pity. So that's how it is. Ayam casually pulled out her blood-stained finger, smiled and said, "Is this the power of qi? Not bad, not bad." With 999% qi, Ayam's internal strength was comparable to those mythical masters in novels. At her level, the flesh and blood of an ordinary person was as fragile as a wet tissue in front of her. Even if she didn't count her LV5 constitution, which had already reached the limit, she could still pierce through steel with just her ki. Ayam had never experienced this feeling before, so she curiously did various experiments on Nikolai's body. For Nikolai, the next half an hour felt like he was being dismembered. The pair of white jade-like slender hands seemed to have become two sharp blades, tearing his flesh, cutting his nerves, and crushing his bones. When Ayam finally had enough, Nikolai was already half dead, and his body looked like a tattered rag. Kill me! Although he did not understand what Ayam was doing, Nikolai was too lazy to ask the reason. He just wanted to die quickly. But would Ayam be so kind to kill him? Of course not. This was the world's most evil person. So at this time, she shouted outside, "Lin Hua, is the thing ready?" "Yes, Master Ayam, the thing is ready." After hearing the boss's call, Lin Hua, the head of the guard department, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, also came in. "Nikolai, this guy. What did he do?" Looking at Nikolai, who was trapped in a special fishing net and had been tortured beyond recognition, Lin Hua sighed slightly and arranged for people to carry this guy out. Where are they going to take me? In a daze, Nikolai only felt that he was carried into a helicopter, and there were medical staff giving him first aid injections and doing some emergency rescue work. After an unknown amount of time, when Nikolai opened his eyes, he was already tied up and fixed to a large cross. It was early in the morning, and the sea breeze with a slightly fishy smell was blowing around. Coupled with the endless sea level not far away, it was easy to see that this was definitely not within the scope of Tokyo. Just at the moment when Nikolai felt inexplicable, a huge dark cloud suddenly floated in the sky, as if it was going to cover the surrounding sky, and quickly floated over here. That is the sixth sky devil? Nikolai looked up, and his eyes almost popped out. Isn't this the war-killing machine that I participated in the design and production of? This huge machine was at least 5 times the length and width of an ordinary plane, and it was as amazing as a huge aircraft carrier sailing in the sea of clouds. The most terrifying thing was that Nikolai could clearly see that the bomb hatch below was slowly opening. The bomb hatch opening was the precursor to a fixed-point bombing. Nikolai had seen this scene many times, but he didn't expect that the bomb hatch would open in front of him. The next moment, a large number of unguided bombs fell from the sky, almost covering the entire beach in the bombing zone. Timma, I am. When did I offend you? And in the center of the explosion zone, Nikolai, who was tied up, could only let out a weak cry, and then buried in the violent explosion that he had designed. Until he was blown to ashes, Nikolai still didn't understand what all this was for. But for Ayam, who was sitting in the bridge of the sixth Sky Devil, she clearly knew that it was better to get rid of this rebellious man as soon as possible, so that he wouldn't bite back at her in the future. At the same time, looking at Nikolai, who was blown to ashes below, Linhua carefully asked, Madam Ayam? Now that Nikolai is dead, what should we do with the weapon department? Let the vice minister take care of it first. I have a very good candidate to replace Nikolai's job later. A very good candidate? That's right. Go and contact the nesting duck prison. And find a name to release the leader of the Rulong group. Rulong group's leader? Tong Xingyuma? The moment he heard this name, Linhua really didn't understand. Speaking of which, the reason why Yuma was imprisoned was actually arranged by Linhua according to Madame Ayam's instructions. In order to control the Rulong group, this extreme organization, in his hands, and when he needed to be used, he would be thrown out to die. But Madame Ayam wanted him to release Yuma? What's going on? Although he didn't know what Madame Ayam was thinking, Linhua could only do as she asked, and didn't dare to ask anymore. What's going on? He felt that Madame Ayam was strange today, as if she was possessed by something strange. While Linhua asked someone to negotiate with the nesting duck prison, he couldn't help but think to himself. And what Linhua didn't expect was that after Ayam settled Nikolai's matter and arranged for Yuma's release, she actually picked up her phone and dialed a special number. Beep, beep, beep. Hello, who is this? After the call was connected, a mature woman's voice came from the other end of the phone, but at the same time, it had the unique aura of a person in a high position. It's me, long time no see, how have you been? Faced with Ayam's scam-like response, the woman on the other end of the phone was silent for a while, and then she asked, Did you call to make fun of me? Tenmu Ayam. Ha, don't say that, who would dare to make fun of you? The leader of Kamiyoshi. After hearing the voice of the woman on the other end of the phone, who was important to him, Ayam couldn't help but smile happily. Chapter 383. In Ayam's eyes, Rui Hui was a very special person, and she was also the person who she misjudged very seriously at the beginning. That's right, Ayam seriously misjudged Rui Hui. This was actually a very serious mistake. From the beginning, this woman had always given her a very righteous feeling, so she judged her as a mortal enemy in her life. Because good and evil could not coexist, gods and demons could not coexist. But from the situation 1 or 2 years later, Rui Hui did not seem to be so righteous, and even the way she did things had begun to become a little evil. According to Ayam's knowledge, this woman colluded with Ryudo to kill many people in Yatsuki Crow, pushed herself to the highest golden heron seat, and also intended to abolish the Zaiwang system. Most of these methods were not honorable at all, and many were even bloody. To put it bluntly, it was no different from what the Heavenly Eye group did. But how to put it, Rui Hui, who would do such things by hook or by crook. Ayam liked it very much. There was no doubt that Rui Hui was not a righteous person. She also hid very deep desires and obsessions in her heart, but she usually hid them very well. In addition, she originally thought that she was about to die. Many times, she felt a little lonely when she did things, so she seemed particularly tragic and selfless. It was not until Rui Hui met Ryudo and solved her terminal illness that she gradually exposed her hidden true side. She became more selfish, more daring, and more ruthless than before. If I knew that she was such a woman, I would have joined forces with her. Why did I have to go through so much trouble? After that, Ayam had thought so, but unfortunately, everything was too late. When she was reborn and knew this in advance, Ayam called Rui Hui and tried to ask her out for a talk. However, although Ayam thought so, Rui Hui's attitude was also very firm. Don't joke around. Why did you call me? You might as well tell me directly. Although the voice that came from the other end sounded very elegant, it was more or less cold and carried a sense of distance. This was a matter of course. After all, Rui Hui knew how vicious the woman on the other end of the phone was. She could be called a female demon. However, I smiled and said, "Don't be so vigilant. Actually, I just want to ask you out for tea and chat, and talk about national affairs or something." "You? Ask me out? Come out for tea and chat?" When Rui Hui heard this, she couldn't help but reveal a sarcastic smile. She laughed and said, "I'm afraid you're planning to use the cup as a signal and prepare a bunch of executioners to chop my head off. So that's what you're afraid of. How about this? You prepare tea in the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, and I won't bring anyone with me. I'll go find you myself. Is that okay?" "Sure, if you dare to come." With a sneer, Rui Hui hung up the phone with the crazy woman. Seriously, that guy is really bored. He called me so early in the morning to make fun of me. After hanging up the phone with Rui Hui sighed slightly and felt speechless. What a joke. Tenmu actually said that she wanted to come and chat with me. How is that possible? This is the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. It would be strange if she dared to come here alone. With this thought, Rui Hui continued to sit in the office and deal with official business, until a strange sound came from the door. Plop. With a flash of a figure outside the door, a sound like something falling to the ground came into Rui Hui's ears. At that moment, Rabbit Ball, who was in charge of guarding the master of the cat house, suddenly appeared in front of the desk and said to Rui Hui in a serious tone, "Master Rui Hui, there seems to be a master outside. Please leave quickly." Great master? Rui Hui frowned. After all, there should be no more than 5 people in the world who could be called a great master by Bunny Ball. In the middle of the day, there is a peerless master who wants to kill me? Wasn't this a little too, Walla? But in the next moment, when the door of the study was opened from the outside, the figure that appeared in front of her gave Rui Hui a fright. "Good morning. I came to have tea with you as promised. But it seems that the tea isn't ready yet?" The person who pushed the door in was a woman with peerless beauty and peerless elegance. She looked at the tense situation inside and said in a frivolous tone, "Tian, Tenmu how is that possible?" The moment they saw the woman, Rui Hui and Bunny Ball couldn't help but widen their eyes, because this situation was really too difficult to understand. First of all, this crazy person really came? She just finished the phone call, and not long after, she really appeared in the Kamiyoshi's base camp? And she really did come alone. Secondly, her strength. How can she be so strong? Rui Hui had fought with for so many years, so she naturally knew about Iam's situation. Although this woman was talented and caused her body to be on a different level from ordinary people, she didn't like to personally fight, so her personal strength wasn't very shocking. But now even Bunny Ball couldn't help but secretly tremble when he saw her. Too strong. She was really too strong. Bunny Ball couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After all, he had never seen such a strong monster. At this moment, Tenmu was flawless in the eyes of this old guardian ninja, as if her body was one with the environment. That feeling of being one with the heavens, one with one, was a special phenomenon that would only happen to peerless masters who cultivated Nigong. Even Bunny Ball was far from this realm, but did it. Her cultivation in this aspect had silently surpassed Bunny Ball. How is this possible? Damn it, what's wrong with this fellow? Did she eat the wrong medicine? No, the key point is that she could actually silently approach Rui Hui's study. This is too dangerous. I have to kill her quickly. Thinking of this, Bunny Ball's eyes couldn't help but emit a killing intent. But waved her hand and laughed. "Don't you want to fight? I advise you not to do anything rash, because it's very dangerous." Before could finish her words, Bunny Ball's figure turned into a stream of light and instantly appeared behind her. Guardian Inner Technique, Sacrificial Blade. 3 fingers formed a triangle and like a sharp whip, he whipped towards slender neck, as if he wanted to punch a hole in there. Bunny Ball's speed could be said to be unparalleled in the world today. The sacrificial blade at such a high speed could even pierce through a steel plate. It could be said to be instant death. Aya. There's no other way. But seeing that the ancient ninja's killing move was about to hit her, Ayam only smirked and casually grabbed towards that side. Grab? Using your hand to grab my sacrificial blade? In a flash, Bunny Ball was first startled, but his gaze turned to shock in the next moment. The other slender arm actually grabbed Bunny Ball's wrist at an even faster speed. She grabbed his wrist that was swinging at a speed that surpassed the speed of sound, and grabbed it right on the spot. Gotcha! Immediately after, Bunny Ball's sleeve exploded as if it had been blown apart, and his wrist, elbow, shoulder and other joints also emitted a strong explosive sound. At the same time he swung his arm to use sacrificial blade, his wrist was suddenly grabbed, causing Bunny Ball's strength to return to his body. His arm was crippled. I told you not to mess around. Seeing Bunny Ball holding his almost crippled wrist, and retreating a few meters back with cold sweat flowing down his forehead, Ayam couldn't help but laugh. You are not my opponent, besides, I don't have any ill intentions. Without a doubt, Ayam's words came from the bottom of her heart. Bunny Ball being able to stand straight like this was the most direct reflection of her lack of ill intentions. Now that her key openness had reached 999%. How strong is this monstrous Ayam? Coupled with her LV5 physique, she has already reached a realm that no one has ever reached before. Even Bunny Ball was unable to withstand a single blow from her. Seeing that Ayam's strength far exceeded his imagination, Bunny Ball took a deep breath and took out a few long needles, intending to try and fight her to the death. As long as the long needles were inserted into a few special parts, they would be able to activate their guardian ninja's ultimate skill, Death Meridian. Through this special acupuncture, Bunny Ball could release all the potential in his body, bringing about a huge increase in strength. Although the outcome would definitely be death, at the very least, he would have to bring Ayam down to hell with him. Bunny Ball, stop. She indeed has no ill intentions. But just as Bunny Ball was preparing to fight Ayam to the death, a stern voice interrupted his actions. It was Rui Hui. Rui Hui slowly stood up, walked out from behind the desk, and walked towards Ayam's direction. Seeing this scene, Bunny Ball hurriedly turned pale with fright and blocked in front of her. Rui Hui-sama, don't get close to her, it's dangerous. It's okay, if she wanted to kill me, she would have already done so. You can't stop her. Hearing Rui Hui-sama's words, Bunny Ball was speechless. Indeed, with the strength that Ayam displayed in that instant, if she really wanted to kill Rui Hui, even if Bunny Ball activated ultimate skill, Death Meridian, he still wouldn't be able to stop her. Now that Rui Hui was still alive, it meant that Ayam really didn't come to fight. Not to mention that she didn't even kill the guardian ninja outside the door. She only knocked him out and made him fall to the ground. From these signs, Ayam really didn't mean to start a massacre here. She really wanted to talk to Rui Hui. Just like this, Rui Hui came in front of Ayam and looked at this woman that she hadn't seen for a long time. In Rui Hui's view, Ayam seemed to have changed a lot. Although she was still the monster that killed without blinking, she seemed to have matured a lot compared to the feeling of showing off before. She seemed to be more restrained. Without a doubt, this Ayam was more terrifying than before. But Rui Hui liked her even more. Didn't you come to drink tea with me? Let's go to the tea room to talk. That's right, lead the way. Seeing that Rui Hui finally understood her meaning, Ayam also smiled and followed behind her. The two women walked side by side to the small tea room not far away. After arriving at the small tea room, Rui Hui knelt in front of the tea table in a dignified manner, reached out her slender white hand to pick up the tea set, and started to make tea for Ayam from boiling water. Rui Hui was well versed in the art of tea ceremony. Her every move looked quite elegant. Her hands swept across the tea table, teapot, and other places in a continuous manner, as if she was performing a graceful and agile performance. In this leisurely morning, seeing such a nemesis sitting in front of her making tea, for Ayam, was quite a wonderful experience. At the same time, it made her feel quite relaxed. After a while, the small tea room was filled with a faint tea fragrance. A faint mist rose from the table, with a familiar fragrance. This smell is. It seems a bit familiar. When she smelled this familiar tea fragrance, Ayam, who was sitting cross-legged without any manners, couldn't help but sniff. This is gold osmanthus king tea, made from the flower stalk of the gold osmanthus tree. Gold osmanthus tree. Speaking of which, there were many gold osmanthus trees by the lake we stayed at before. So you still remember? After hearing Ayam mention this matter, Rui Hui poured tea for her and sighed slightly. What happened by the lake back then could be said to be one of Rui Hui's greatest regrets. Rui Hui was partly responsible for not being able to lead Ayam back to the right path, and watching this child walk step by step until today. But that was already in the past, and people couldn't always be immersed in memories. So Rui Hui took a sip of tea and asked lightly, "Speak, what are you here for?" "Well, if I say that I'm here to cooperate with you, would you believe me?" "Yes, but whether I'll agree or not is another matter." From Rui Hui's perspective, she was still the leader of the Kamiyoshi tribe. If she were to wallow in the mire with Ayam, it would be too. Don't be in a hurry to reject. How about you listen to my conditions first? Conditions? It's nothing more than helping my Kamiyoshi tribe rise to the top. What other conditions can you give me? That's hard to say. For example, I can cure your terminal illness, and I can also let your daughter live, so that she doesn't have to be the vegetarian king anymore, and can live as a free person. In the small tea room filled with mist, Ayam said in a joking tone, but every word fell into Rui Hui's heart. What? At this moment, Rui Hui couldn't help but take a deep breath. After all, Ayam's conditions were really too targeted. It was aimed at Rui Hui's greatest weakness. To put it bluntly, what was Rui Hui most concerned about? The first was her daughter, and the second was herself. As for other things, they could be put aside, especially the future of the Kamiyoshi tribe. It had nothing to do with her. And Ayam's conditions were to save her life first, and then save her daughter's future. Who wouldn't be moved by this? After a moment, Rui Hui still shook her head and said, "It sounds very tempting, but you have to be able to do it." Before Rui Hui's voice fell, Ayam took out a translucent pearl from nowhere, and it emitted a rich medicinal fragrance, and handed it to Rui Hui. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.